of Team Gwentlemen are thrilled to announce something special we've been assembling for quite some time: the Gwentlemen's Invitational. The Gwentlemen's Invitational, or TGI, is a comprehensive team-based tournament drawn from the entirety of the Gwent community worldwide. Dozens of teams of 3 will compete for 5 weeks of Swiss-style Gwent competition in a best-of-5 conquest matches. The highest achievers among those shall advance to a round of playoffs where they will compete in a single elimination bracket in a best-of-5 conquest matches to determine the greatest Gwent team of all. All manner of Gwent-focused groups will be receiving invites to play in the tourney. You'll see teams formed by pro esports organizations like Fatesy Karma, nation-based alliances like the French Community, Gwent groups like Commander's Horn, and individual tournament champions like TGO July's Vishra. To give everyone a shot at competing, popular forums like Reddit's r/Gwent and Discord's public Gwent servers will get to elect teams from the best and brightest amongst them to enter the fray. Multiple matches will be shoutcasted every week for the community on Team Gwentlemen's Twitch channel, featuring celebrity casters from within Gwent community like Mega Mogwai, as well as some surprise hosts we'll reveal soon. The Gwentlemen's Invitational will last a total of roughly 6 weeks, so buckle up. Gwent will witness at least one significant content patch along the way, so TGI could truly be anyone's game.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all you monsters in between, and welcome to the Gwentlemen Invitational, Week 3. My name is Gravez, and today I'm joined by HG3. What up, HG?
Hey, Gravez, how's it going? It's good to be back again for another week of TGI action. Week 3, almost halfway done, huh?
I know, but you know, it's been so good so far. We've had some pretty exciting games. We've had some really crazy plays, and we've got some good games for you guys today. What's going on today?
Well, today we got 2 more matches for the viewers, and our first match is going to be one with some familiar figures in it, of course. Our first match is going to be between the Commander's Horn Commandos and Fade to Karma Group 3. And we'll get to preview that in a little while, but I think before we get to that match, we're going to take a look at the brackets coming into week 3, maybe some results other than our matches for today, since of course the matches for week 3 have already happened. Let's take a look at that bracket and see how everything panned out.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting bracket. We do obviously have some teams who have those 3 losses, and we've got teams that have the 3 wins. And 3 losses does, unfortunately, I believe, mean that you are out of the running for the single elimination playoffs, unfortunately. So you can see, obviously, we have CD Projekt Red not looking so hot this week. That's their 3rd loss as they went up against Zendar. Meanwhile, as you can see, you know, a whole kind of mix of things in terms of the teams. Which teams are you most interested in? Which matches do you think were most surprising or maybe most predictable?
Well, I think, you know, Strawberry Dumplings taking another loss there. We're going to see Impetuous Pandy is going to be on the cast later on, the 2nd game of the evening. But, you know, a team that features him, Garuna, and Karis having 2 losses already, that means they're on the brink of elimination. And there's a couple other teams on the brink of elimination too, most notably Gwentlemen Blue, Pumpkin Squad. Pumpkin's also going to be here, and F2K3. I mean, I'm not sure if they're bringing casters on because they're going to have some more free time if they drop out of the tournament, or it seems like it's a risky crew this week. They need to start performing. The tournament's really tough right now.
Oh, definitely. That 1-2 position is pretty scary, I would say. I think we've seen, what, about 6 teams now go to 0-3. So we've lost 6 teams from the potential finals. But, you know, 1-2 isn't the end of the world. If you can win your next 3 matchups, you still have a chance to go all the way to the end. And we've been seeing increases in the prizing week on week. Obviously, any donations that come in through the TGI do go towards that prize pool. And we're getting pretty close to $1,000 now.
Yeah, and it would be a really big landmark goal to hit $1,000. We're already around $900, which is amazing considering the prize pool started off at $200. So, and if you have any money you can contribute to the prize pool, 100% of the donations to Gwentlemen's Twitch account is going to go towards the prize pool. So you're helping to create one of the biggest tournament prize pools in Gwent thus far, aside from, you know, Challenger and what have you. And it's really helpful, and it's great since it's a community initiative. It shows how much the community cares about this kind of thing, and it'll help out a lot of these players that have given a lot towards the game and, you know, haven't had opportunities in big tournaments yet. This is really a platform for them to build upon moving forward.
Oh, definitely. And because each team makes up, 3 people, bear in mind that prize pool does get split, 3 ways between the teams, unless, maybe the team captain's going to be a bit cheeky and keep it all for himself. But the prize pool does get split up. So obviously, the more that you contribute, the more that each player gets. And really, it's just great to see, the community contributing to Gwent. It shows CDPR that there is thirst for competitive Gwent out there, which is, something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, and especially with the announcements coming out about the future of competitive Gwent today, it seems like it's really positive. So, these are players, these are teams that you may see a lot more coming from in the coming months with Gwent esports becoming more of a thing. So, exciting times. And I think we're ready to start talking about this first matchup. We got a good one, Jagras. I mean, the first team for the first match, of course, the Commander's Horn Commandos. That is McBeard's team featuring him, Delta 65, and A-. 3 really prominent players that have been good on the ladder. McBeard, of course, the veteran amongst veterans. He's been around forever. He's probably en route to Cologne right now, getting ready to cast the Gamescom Invitational this next weekend. This is a team that also needs a victory here. They had a loss against, some fantastic EU team. I think it's Idealist EU. I hardly know them, but I like them a lot. And of course, they want to produce and do well. I think Delta and A- both donated money that they were, banter a little bit about the fact that they're going to take it back by winning the tournament anyway. So a lot on the line for them.
Oh, definitely. And then in the blue corner, we obviously have F2K Group 3 featuring Mithranor as the captain, then Aya Shuffles and Veranis. And all of these players are, well-known streamers within the community. You can catch them all on Twitch. All been signed by F2K, who's actually signed quite a few Gwent streamers, I do believe. And I think pretty solid team as well. I think they have their Gwent knowledge pretty down. I mean, who do you favor? Who do you think is going to take it?
It's a tough call to make. I have to say Delta, in Delta's bio, he included the fact that he was very close with helping Trump become a stronger Gwent player. There was a lot of people, worried about Trump going into Challenger. And he did a good job and helped out there. He's definitely a veteran. He's got savvy coaching and talking, communicating. I think that might be really high in his skill set. So I have to say I kind of favor Commander's Horn. It might be because of closer to some of their players as well. Might be biased. But Fate to Karma is no joke. And they got to try and avenge Fate to Karma Group 2, who did get eliminated this past week. Mogwai took down Gwent together, but his team didn't do so well in the team format. So I think they got a little chip on their shoulder. Maybe they come out swinging.
Yeah, there's definitely something to prove for the Fate to Karma teams. I mean, I guess, can't win with one team, just have 3, and then eventually you maybe will win something. I know that I think Aya's been playing a little bit less Gwent recently, so maybe they're not as fresh as, say, the Commandos, who, I do see streaming very regularly. I mean, I've played against A- before in ranked. I did beat him, so there is that. But they are definitely solid players, and I kind of have to agree with you. I think Commander's Horn Commandos will take it, but I don't think it'll be a 3-0 sweep.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to see. I think we're getting ready to transition into the cast. For the first match, we have the commentators Swim and Pumpkin doing it. They'll take over with the cast right now.
Yo, how's it going, everybody? I don't know where Swim is.
Oh,
Pumpkin
oops.
is here.
Hello. Hey, Pumpkin. Sorry, little technical snafu. But yeah, Pumpkin and I are going to be casting this first set in the series. As mentioned, this is going to be Commander's Horn Commandos versus Fate to Karma Group 3. We should be able to jump into that now. Now, Pumpkin, what do you think about these 6 players?
I personally know a couple of them. Mithranor is a solid player. He plays a good amount of Scoia'tael and monsters.
Absolutely.
Not quite sure. I've seen Delta play quite a bit. He's a solid all-around player.
Yeah. Delta used to have he and I used to be dwarf buddies way back in the day. So yeah, we should be able to start this game off here. And let's jump into the match. So now this first game is going to be A- from the Commandos on Eithne versus Mithranor on Emmer. Now, Pumpkin, what do you think about this matchup? And it's completely contingent on what Eithne this is. We're going to have to see if they're bringing Hyperthin right off the bat or what. But if it is Hyperthin, what do you think?
If it's Hyperthin, well, from personal experience, Hyperthin, the game's already over. This looks like a a different list. It runs Siri Dash, but it has some buffing units such as Hawker support.
Yeah, it's good. It's using triple archer as well.
So what they need to do if they run Bran is get Hawker supports out on the Bran so that once Avalok gets shackled, you instantly snipe it.
Yep. That's definitely a good point. The Avalok coming down from the Amir basically being a tell that they are using a mill variant, and the hyper thin list is of course very vulnerable to that because it mills itself so much. So Mithranor is going to be presumably demoting Avalok to return it, and as you said, if Commander Soren is, or A- on Commander Soren Commandos, is able to preemptively buff a Brienne, they will be able to deny it immediately, or they could potentially transmute with Shiru, but that makes less sense.
But yeah, they have Bran in opening hand, so they're in a very solid position here. They need to lead out with that pretty soon.
Now, do you think, and Mithranor's game plan here is going to be entirely just about overdrawing A-? Do you think that even if the Avalok is answered, like the Avalok isn't in hand right now, do you think that even when the Avalok gets answered, is the mill still going to represent a big threat for A- here? Like, is he still going to be in overdraw territory with this list?
Depends on if he thins with his mercenaries. When I've run into this matchup, I usually use my mercenaries and just weather clear the non-existent weather.
Yeah.
To prevent milling myself.
We see here an early emissary coming up by Mithranor, pulling on Nausicaa's standard bearer, potentially a little awkward for him, and we can actually see there is a sneaky Skellige Storm in A-'s deck. The lack of ability to clear that could actually potentially be hurting Mithranor when that is dropped in a later round.
For sure, no doubt. I mean, they're buffing Bren here, so they're good to go. They can just start playing things out. There's really no threat at the moment.
Yeah. So do you think, how easy of a time do you think A- is going to have getting these Scourges off in this matchup? Because that's really what you're playing for. I mean, you've got 3 archers to align these Scorches. You're really looking to get good value out of them, but Mithranor's deck doesn't really play super tall units. He is going to be running some Alchemists. He hasn't drawn into any yet. There's the Swears hitting, that was the last support out of the deck. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's it's not a huge Swears hit, but it is definitely hitting something. And A- is definitely at threat of potentially overdrawing later into this game.
For sure. Do we know if F2K is running Tibor?
We do not have lists prepared because, of course, lists weren't submitted. In this format, players are able to openly change their lists between games, and they probably have Tibor, but it's a little bit hard to say. I mean, do you think that mill deck really should or has to bring Tibor?
It really depends on what you're playing against. Depending on what Mithranor and the rest of the team wants to use, I found against Squaretel, Tibor is quite strong because generally they don't run Shackles, and I'm not seeing Shackles in their list. So if Tibor does come out, that's 23 points of gold value that A- isn't going to be able to interact with.
Yep. Yeah, and over here, we're seeing a pretty good hand out of A-. He has all of his tools. He has his marching orders pulling into his last mercenary. He, honestly, if anything, has probably too many bronzes in his hand, I assume, because he has too many thinging tools. All the 3 first lights are going to be pulling out redundant units because the marching orders is already pulling out the mercenary. So the third first light is going to be bricked, especially with that Hawker support being discarded by that Swears. Who do you think has the upper hand here? Because this is definitely tricky. I feel like A- just might get overdrawn, right?
They might get overdrawn, but in this opening hand, Mithranor's hand is quite bad. If he doesn't find Avalok, he's going to be in trouble. The entire matchup is dependent on Avalok. Yeah, he is going to start milling himself, but it's not an issue right now. The biggest issue is A- needs to win this round.
Yeah, and he has the Saskia to help him do it, coming out for free points. Now, that's not something that you run in your variant of the list, and I know that, especially when you're against this mill matchup, you don't really relish the idea of that card just pulling itself out, but at the same time, it does really allow him to push that round 1 just the more harder, although he won't necessarily need it, because as you said, Mithranor is sitting on a bit of a sticky hand right now. He looks like he's going to Ceres to try to remedy that. He's going to end up switching out the Kahir and finding the Stefan.
That's unfortunate. If he had another Alchemist in hand, he could Siphon Avalok to the top and pull that out. He's not going to be able to do that. He could, however, M here the Alchemist if he really wanted to on the standard pair. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean this. It's gonna be basically the round one. A- has the advantage here. I mean, like you said, Mithranar is sitting on a pretty clunky hand right now. Like he'll get a decent value out of the lacerate on the range throw. So A- has the round one advantage. But if Mithranar is able to successfully pull off like overdrawing chain, A-'s variant of the deck is very notably susceptible to that as well. I mean, you have. Like we said earlier, he drew into too many bronzes. He has the Saskia. He has all the same cards that pull other cards. He's got the Nature's Gift, the Marching Orders, and he's going to potentially be... I mean, there is definitely potential that he will get overdrawn by 3 or 4 cards here.
Here's the other issue. I mean, hitting Siri Dash is pretty important in the opening round, just to prevent them milling, and they don't have it yet. And if they don't hit Siri Dash next round, this game is probably over.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. He's pulling the Scorch out now, which is... He's looking for that 16-point Scorch, which is very smart.
Yeah, a little graphical bug. That little frame of a silver card is the Scorch that Shiru created. He has the ability to hit that Alchemist with it, and it'll, of course, line up with the Sarah as well. Now, Mithranar is aware of this. He can Seer to block it, but at the same time, you don't really want to commit your Seer just as a body in that regard.
Not at all. A Searing right now would be a horrendous idea. I think Mithranar is deciding whether or not he wants to lacerate here or get out of this round.
Yeah, it'll probably be...
Go ahead.
I was saying it's probably a trade lacerate for something relatively non-committal, like an additional elf out here. There's no Aileron in A-'s deck, so an additional elf out here that, you know, just forces Mithranar out around. Really, this round is just about how far Mithranar wants to push before getting out of it, right? Like, he does not have a hand to be able to win this round, but he can effectively, at the very least, gain a little bit of extra value by kind of forcing resources out of A-, resources that are better than what he has. For example, he lacerated to kind of trade for a Trapper because he didn't really want the redundant second lacerate.
No, I completely agree. Because it is the mill matchup, and because you never really want mill to win round one, you're always the danger of losing. So even if they're playing really small tempo swings, you still have to respect the in-keep playing, and that is what A- is doing here. He's probably going to look for the smallest unit he can to catch up with this round. However, Merc doesn't really work here unless you want to keep winning, so my guess is he'll probably Scorch here.
Looks like he's going for the Merc. Yeah, and there's 4 choices. There's 2 First Lights, 1 Alzur's Thunder, and 1 Lacerates. He doesn't hit either First Light. So, I mean, he basically... What do you do here? Do you just zap? And if you zap, do you zap the 5? Yeah. So he's keeping that Scorch alive. Just threatening to push Mithranar out. If Mithranar does commit more, he can force out the Scorch. But at the same time, ooh, he goes for the pass. So Mithranar elects to give this round up on even cards, hoping that he will draw into better cards. Now, he did Swears presumably an Avalak, right?
Yes, I would assume he'd be top decking Avalak.
There it is. Okay. And there's the Saskia draw by A- as well. So that's gonna have to go. We see here the Yavin. Now Yavin's pretty much what you want here. Hopefully it gives you access to that Siri Dash.
I mean, yeah, you play Yavin, but it's thinning your deck. So there are some times where you just don't play Yavin. You play it here if you can hit Siri Dash. If you miss the Siri Dash, it's quite bad because you don't exactly want to be thinning yourself. So there is some risk. We'll see what they decide to do. It looks like he's going to go for the Siri Dash.
Yep. And Mithranar electing during the Mulligan phase to get rid of the D-Bomb. He knows he's not necessarily going to get as much value out of its effect, and he's got the demote off with D-Shackles if he wants it there as well. We find the Siri Dash with the Yavin. That's great news for A-. Very happy about that. He'll be able to drop that one down. Do you think is there any consideration at all to D-Shackling the Siri Dash? There wouldn't be, right? If he kept the D-Bomb, then perhaps.
Perhaps if he kept the D-Bomb, but if he shackles this, there's no way. He would have to Assire it and then top deck it, which just isn't going to happen.
But at the same time, Avalak could draw into the D-bomb, which would mean the shackles on the Siri Dash could potentially represent a decent amount of value.
Potentially. I mean, the way that A- needs to play this is the instant they see the Avalok, they have to pass. Just because normally, if you play Avalok, you then have to play shackles into M here. And if you pass, it basically forces your opponent to play 2 more cards, even though they're up in points.
Yeah, and we could see the Avalak being dropped now, as that Skellig Storm, without Mithranor having the ability to clear it, represents some value over time. Although at the same time, Mithranor knows he's just being bled out and isn't necessarily interested in playing for value. So he's deciding whether he wants to throw that Avalak, and he is aware of that risk. But at the same time, can A- afford to pass here? Because he really is going to want to commit that Siri Dash, right?
Yes and no. I mean, you're playing the card. However, at the end of the day, it's not really going to matter. It's going to be 3 extra gold value, I guess. But if you top deck the Dime Bomb, it's not going to matter. All right, there's the Saskia and the Scorch. Top decks here don't really matter. That's the thing. You play Siri Dash, you're getting rid of 1 card in this hand, you're just going to draw it later. At the end of the day, it's an extra 3 power. But if your opponent has like a Dime Bomb or Shackles, you're kind of screwed. A- is just going to go with the last rate. They're going to keep pushing. So here's the issue. If they do shackle the Avalok, they can simply brand or Scorch. And that's huge. So what Mithranor is doing right here is he's going to play the Knight. And this prevents Avalok from getting Scorched. However, this has no effect as A- has a brand in hand, so it's not going to be an issue whatsoever.
Yeah, you don't usually see the brain in these kind of decks. A pretty atypical tech card to say the least, but it looks like it may be about to pay off in a substantial way here, although of course the first Scorch enabling the second Scorch on the Avalok regardless. Basically, this round, unlike last round, is completely up to A-. Last round was all Mithranor is just playing, bleeding the opponent out because he knows he's lost it anyway. A- is bleeding the opponent out because he knows he's lost it anyway, and he's just giving it up on his terms here.
Yep. I believe Scorch here is the correct play. You can save Brain for round 3 for more power. He is going to Scorch here. Definitely the correct play. Mithranor's in a tight spot here. Also, Albrecht is now gone. He can no longer M here that. He lost his chance to do that. Mithranor's in a tough spot here.
Now, he does have the play to be potentially put the Yavin on the other side with the Decoy or the Emir. He's not really looking at as many points as he was before because this Skellig Storm is really, really starting to take its toll, such that he's not really getting as much value out of that.
Yeah, he's going to be putting a Sire and Albrecht back, so he needs to top deck this. If he does not top deck this game is over.
Yeah, I mean, his win condition is basically just overdrawing at this point. Now, A-, again, he's playing this out. He has as much time as he can, and he's going to pretty much, I think, develop the Siri Dash before this goes to round 3. So him playing the Siri Dash it would be, at any point, a tell that he might be ready to get out of this round. We'll have to see.
Definitely. But at this point, he's going to be getting out of the round anyways. He's going to be playing all his gold power last round and Brain as his very last card. He'll be needing to play Bork. Oh, he's pushing this round. He's going for the 12.
Wow.
This is not uncommon whatsoever. One of the easiest ways to beat Mill is simply 2-0 them. If they can't draw their card, the game ends. So he needs to M here this back into his hand, play a different card, which is going to be his Alpha Myth, and he needs to hit Albrecht Avalok here.
And there it is, he hits the Albrecht. That enables his Decoy, so Albrecht and Decoy draws him 2 more cards, which potentially could draw him into Avalok, drawing even more.
Unless he gets Scorched here, which is what's happening.
Yeah.
So now the Albrecht comes out, so you pray in this most times. The issue is your Bork is going to get... He's going to kill your Brain.
That is absolutely the issue here. I mean, what do you do? Would you brand this? There's no way to be able to protect your brand from your Bork if you go for it, but at the same time, you're enabling that Decoy by waiting. Really, really awkward situation for A- just because Bork was just about to go off there. That's a nice D-bomb on the Bork. This is going to make it Scorch itself. It's really convenient that Skellige Storm setting,
yeah,
in this case, setting Albrecht to 7, really enabling that line of play. And here's this
so
decoy.
This has to hit Avalok.
Is there one last Foot Soldiers in the deck? Or is that
I believe so. So
Yeah,
okay, Foot Soldiers would work. He does not hit it.
Yep. So now
A dead.
A- can pass and force an extra card out here if he wants to as well. And
That is true.
But at the same time, like you said, taking Mill to round 3 is definitely a risky affair. I mean, giving them extra draws into their combos, as well as like forcing yourself to draw extra times. And in a situation where A- is already basically decked, it goes ahead and decides to drop the first light here. Presumably, he's going to be going for the bleed. Now, he knows that Mithranor doesn't see his brain, so he's basically playing his archer out next. He's going to be saving his brain for his last card. If it's enough to take it, he'll 2-round. If it's not, he plans to go to round 3 with his brain, and that is a pretty big brain indeed.
Oh, that is huge. I'm almost positive this game is already over. He's going to archer the soldier here, most likely. Be my guess. Unless he's worried. I mean, he would always put the soldier here.
Yeah, and that brain is just a guaranteed 19 points. And 19 points is always going to beat anything Nilf Knight can go with. So this first game of the set is going to go to A- from Commander's Horn. A pretty clean 2-0. Mithranor didn't really have the tools in the opening hand to even be able to try anything tricky there, but at the same time, it is pretty much an unfavored matchup, especially with that sneaky brain tech really denying Mithranor's ability to even try, even in a rare circumstance, to be able to reuse that Avalak with Decoy or Emir.
Yeah, for sure. The brain tech was huge. Even if he was able to Avalok Shackles in the first round, the brain coming out would have shut him down. He would have had the top deck in round 2. And as we saw there, they were unsuccessful with the Albrecht top decks. And yeah, that is a very interesting matchup. Reverse, or not reverse thin. Hyper thin generally does not win that matchup. Very well played.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of the text here, but we'll be getting into next game. Now, A- is out on Ithne. Keep in mind that this is a conquest format, so here we're going to see a brand mirror between Aya Shuffles from F2K and Delta 65 from Commander's Horn. So we're going to have to see, and these are pretty similar decks. They might differ in one or two ways. There's a Holger Blackhand. It looks like Delta's actually using a Queensguard variant here. What do you think about this?
I've actually found that Queensguard can do quite well against this card if they can manage to pull round 1. That is going to be the biggest issue here, and that is very dependent on opening hands. I believe this entire matchup is going to be reliant on who draws better in the first round.
And that Lacerate is going to definitely be a really good tool for forcing out this round 1, but Delta at the same time doesn't really have the kind of hand that you really want for being able to push that round 1. He doesn't have a lot of his super high value cards. He doesn't have his Madman, and here's
at the same time, look at F2K's hand. I mean, they have double Freya, Morkvarg, Olgir. It's not a great hand.
So
no
there's
Ermion.
There's the warship being developed right off. Here's a Bran, presumably 2 Queensguard. Now, is there consideration at all? So he's going Queensguard, Ceres, Queensguard here. Okay.
Yep. I mean, based on this opening hand, it looks like Commander's Horn has the advantage. I mean, with Ermion, you're going to be able to cycle through a good portion of your deck. And F2K's hand is just atrocious here.
And there's a chance we might see this Donar coming out. There's no Raiders in F2K's hand. If this snipes a Raider, it summons...
my goodness.
And this procs Ceres. Ceres just got a tick out of that as well.
That's...
a huge Donar snipe, because Aya did not have any of her 3 Raiders in her opening hand there, locking up the warship as well, and no potential Donar counterplay in Aya's hand whatsoever. That's definitely a huge play.
That's huge. I mean, potentially that's the game. You prevent a Raider from the future, which is 1 less Ceres proc. Also, that is his only boat in hand, which means he's not pinging anything. This is huge.
Yeah, I mean, no follow-up Donar from Aya really limits her options here. She's going to use her own Bran, presumably on the combo. Now, Morkvarg and Olgierd both being in hand, what do you Bran out here? You Bran Ceres and 2 Raiders?
Sarah's and 2 raiders, or you could hit a boat and Freya the boat out, which she did do.
Yeah, she's going for it. She's ready to Freya a boat to enable a little bit of extra value out of her Clan Demon Pirates and her Udalric as well, since those will still be discarding.
Yep, so Delta pulls out Holger here to buff up one of the Queensguard, very common. He's gonna... Here comes the boat.
So this boat is going to represent Aya's ability to be able to stay in this round a little bit better, even after that huge Donar play. Who do you think has control over this round 1 if they want it? Because both players are sitting on Coral, and both players, as you mentioned before, have slightly clunky hands. This Lacerate might prove to be worth a little bit of extra value, and these Queensguards aren't bad either. I mean, who do you think has this round 1 if they want to commit for it?
It depends on what this Hermione hits. This is... Yeah.
The Udalric as well, a little.
Yeah, that's true. He pulled a Freya and another captain, I believe. This is a rough discard. I think you have to hit the Queensguard here because you have Freya in hand. So Queensguard discard here is correct. The question is, what is the second card?
Yeah, I mean, he was hovering Lacerate as well. But at the same time, kicking Lacerate is kind of an awkward discard because your mechanics don't really support the idea of discarding spells. Clan Demon Pirate Captains and other effects that trigger off of discards do it every time you discard a unit, and that's one of these slight awkwardnesses with the Lacerate tech. But at the same time, Delta is presumably making the decision that Lacerate is going to be very useful in pushing this round 1, and like you said, this matchup when you're running Queensguard is all about the round 1, so this Lacerate can still be very useful here, electing to kick the captain instead here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but it's Commander's Horn looks like in the better position here. Yeah, they have a Sigdrifa, which isn't great. However, F2K has Morkvarg, and yeah, it's good for next round, but this round is pretty awful. They also have a Sigdrifa, so these hands are quite similar. This Udalric pull is going to be, I mean, it's a 6-point Udalric Coral, so we'll have to see what it pulls. This is probably going to be the Queensguard here.
Yep, and this is going to trigger Ceres as well. Pretty solid play coming out. I mean, both players, as you said, are sitting on, at this point, 2 pretty much dead reses, Sigdrifa and a Freya each. But this first Freya from Delta being able to hit a huge value because he's running the Queensguard variant.
Generally in the Queensguard, you kind of want to wait on the Queensguard because Coral, like if he gets Coral, he's not going to be able to do anything to reset the power. So a common play is actually just to stay behind on Queensguard, and once they pass, just catch up with Queensguard. However, if they do get the Coral out in this round, it just means that there's going to be no Coral in future rounds, so it's not actually bad. F2K is going to play Dark on the front row, presumably, and they need to hit something nice here.
Yep. I mean, it's also going to depend where the warship shoots. Ooh, that warship just shot melee. So the Coral on the melee row there, wow. That's unfortunate.
It is very unfortunate.
That shot made the difference, right? The Coral on the melee row is now on 20 points, right?
Yep.
20 points exactly. So they lost exactly 1 point off that shot, hitting the wrong target there. And Aya has no way of being able to beat this in a single card now.
Yeah, so F2K has to decide whether or not they're willing to go 2 cards down. Generally, in the matchup against Queensguard, you can't afford not to. So I think they're going to play this out. Cora will probably not. This is very difficult. I don't know.
Yeah, no, this is super awkward. A really great pass coming out by Delta 65 from Commander's Horn Commandos. It really forces Aya into a difficult position here. I mean, she has no great plays here. She's hovering Warship. Does that mean... I mean, you still have to take it with Coral, right? Warship can't win without anything other than Coral here, I believe.
Yep.
So,
Coral.
Committing both an extra warship and the Coral, it's a large amount of resources she's not going to have later. And the extra tempo she'll get out of these quite large Olgierd and Morkvarg coming back, larger than normal because they were played from hand, is going to be pretty mitigated by Delta just slamming Queensguard and his own Ceres down immediately.
Yeah, F2K is in a really, really awkward spot here. We'll have to see. I mean, draws again are going to be very dependent. But Delta's in a great position. Yeah, they're going to be looking for Lugos. Wow, it's one of the better cards in this matchup. My guess is he's gonna mulligan the Raider away just to have that target, and because he's already played Ermion, he's not gonna have a use for Raider.
Now, in terms of graveyard value, Delta has one thing that Aya does not, which is his Sigdrifa can hit that Donar. How many Raiders has Aya played out here? Was it only the 2, right? One stolen by Donar and one discarded from Bren, if that's correct. So there is potential for Sigdrifa Donar to steal that 3rd Raider, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Most likely Freya or Sigdrifa. I don't know why you Sigdrifa here. I'm guessing Freya comes out here and pulls the Queen.
Yeah, it would.
Be a no.
Just beating in a single card, going to a nice clean round 3 where Delta has a 1 card advantage here.
Yep. Against Queensguard, the general strategy in round 2, if you win round 1, is to instantly pass. Otherwise, Queensguard can get up enough where you don't get that card advantage. Delta, they still have Coral. That's big.
Still holding on to Coral is definitely it is one of the deciders here. I mean, they've got the Madman, they've got the Coral, they've got a lot of value in hand here. There is an operator which isn't so great at the same time. Do you mulligan that operator here? You should, right?
It's I mean, what is it going to hit? A pirate? You have no use for that. I mean, it's a 7-point play. It's horrendous. It's useful in round 1. I'm not a big fan of operator because out of round 1, it's pretty garbage.
And we see here Aya drawing into her own Madman Lugos. That's pretty valuable. And at the same time, as Delta draws into his Raider, which is quite the opposite. Is that the last Raider in his deck? Did he just brick his Lugos? Or am I?
I'm not quite
We're not
sure.
exactly sure what his list is. I'm not sure how many Raiders Queensguards run.
Also take note, one of the Raiders in his graveyard was pulled from Aya's deck.
Yeah. So, I mean, he might... Those mulligans might have just turned this a little bit in Aya's favor. Finding the Lugos, whereas Delta finds the Raider. Possibly the best and worst things, respectively, actually.
For sure, yeah. Aya has 2 Pirate Captains and Ermion, which is going to boost those up.
Delta's thinking right now, he sees the ship, he wants to deal with it. He's considering 2 options, which is Sigdrifa Donar to lock it, potentially stealing something else valuable, or Madman Lugos to discard something high enough to kill it right off. It looks like he's going for the Lugos line of play here, just not letting that ship get value. He knows that Ermion and a Lugos have not been played from Aya, and there is an additional Raider. So he's going to discard his Pirate Captain here just to be able to kill that ship down. Are we going to see the Sigdrifa res it? There's no better res target, right? Aya has not found her silver units here.
There is a Skirmisher, but the boat should be more value, right? You have 3 discards. Right, boat versus Skirmisher is 4-point difference, but with Ermion and Lugos, you should be discarding 3. So it's an extra 2 points by taking the boat here.
At the same time, though, it does open up the line of play for the Sigdrifa lock, right? It is worth 2 more points, but it does have that inherent risk that it might not end up going off after all. And here's the Donar. Do they hit the last Raider?
I don't. But,
No.
I mean, that would be kind of nutty.
That would be fairly nutty, yes. And at the same time, I mean, they're starting to get milled, right? Aya is sitting on 3 cards in deck right now, and Lugos and Ermion are both going to draw a total of 3 as well. I mean, if there is something super cheeky, like the decoy on Donar, which there's kind of no lock target, so you can't commit that because then you're running out of Queensguard. But at the same time, is there any potential for Aya to be overdrawing here?
No, I don't believe so. I mean... No, there's not. So Aya hits a Raider, which is nice. If you noticed, when she clicked on Lugos, there was only 1 card to select, which means the other 2 cards are not units.
Yeah, I believe
out here.
They're both silvers, Gremist and the last silver, I believe.
Yeah, so Ermion hits are pretty bad. It's not great. So you're just gonna Ermion for the value on the Pirate Captains.
Yeah, basically. And that value probably will not be enough. I mean, we see Delta's hand, and while he does have that bricked Raider, he's sitting on a very high value Coral and a definitely respectable Lacerate. I mean, Aya should be disfavored here, right? I don't see the points working out in her favor. Those captains are 16 each.
Yeah, but Delta has last say, which means the Coral is going to be hitting one of those pirates. We'll see what they do.
Yeah, the Donar and the Gramist.
Yep.
Kind of unfortunate draws out of there with Aya. You'd really like to hit those cards earlier instead of just being forced to discard them right out at the end of the game.
For sure, yeah. So the Raider's going to come out. My guess is Coral will come out immediately after. Generally, you want to play Coral before you play your damaging spells just to maximize the value out of them. Pirate Captain should be coming down on the middle row.
Yeah, the Pirate Captain goes ranged. If the Lacerate comes down here, the second Pirate Captain will come down on the row that the Lacerate happened in, and then the Coral will be used on that row as well.
So, Lacerating here is fine because they know that there's another Pirate Captain.
Yep.
If they've been paying attention. So whichever row that Pirate Captain goes on gets Coral.
Siege in this case, and then the Coral comes down. And Delta will be taking this one as well. Going 2 up for Commander's Horn Commandos against Group 3 Fade to Karma. Now, we've seen specifically... We've seen the first deck out of the Fade to Karma, the Mill deck, Mithranor's Mill deck, and that still needs to get a win, as does Aya's brand list. Although, of course, these lists are tweakable. The leaders are locked in, but the individual cards are changeable between these series. So, Fade to Karma still needs to win with an Emir and a Bran, in addition to both players' last leaders that we haven't seen yet.
Yep, and it's going to be, do we know the third list for F2K?
We're about to find out going into game 3 here. Oh, well, we're not about to find out. I don't know off the top of my head what it is now.
So it's
it looks, yeah. Well, Henselt is the third deck for Commander's Horn, not F2K.
Yeah.
But it looks like their F2K has decided to reuse the brand here. Aya playing it. They knew that the last deck was Henselt, so they're choosing that Bran basically has the best say in this matchup. What do you think about this matchup? I think it's a very particularly nuanced one.
Yeah, so the Coral hitting the Reavers, they need to either make sure that they stagger the Reavers. Pulling this here sucks.
Oh, yeah.
And no Kadewani. You're going to have to reinforcement the Kadewani's out. That's not fun, but it has to happen. The Olgierd, that's interesting. Most lists have dropped Olgierd. It must have been a tech card.
Yeah, this is really, really bad for McBeard right off the bat. I mean, as you said, those are not what you want to see. You don't want to see the 2 Nightlicks. You don't want to see the lack of the Sergeants in hand. And we can see that there is a Lugos in Aya's hand as well, which is going to swiftly answer this Sergeant and prevent it from being Henselted out should it come down right away.
Yeah, I mean, this matchup, I personally have played a good amount of Henselt, and if SK can kill it, the Kadewani, you're in a really, really awkward situation where you either have to pass. Okay, so this is really...
Yeah, what do you think about this line of play? It's very interesting.
Doesn't want to play the reinforcement.
I mean, basically, it is the play that says, you know, I've got a really bad hand. I'm hoping that I'm not going to be drawing into worst cards and hoping to be drawing into better cards, giving up this round early. At the same time, though, that's a risky proposition with Northern Realms. I mean, you've still got 3 commandos, 3 infantrymen. This is definitely a scary draw. If you're McBeard, you're closing your eyes right now and praying.
For sure, there's a lot of bad top decks here.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of stuttering here. It looks like the recorded video had some compression errors. There is that commando. You're going to have to get rid of that. You need a sergeant, right? And there's that last Nihilux.
Doesn't hit it. So he has to reinforce. Honestly, like, this round is...
Yeah, I don't see McBeard having a stay in this at all. I mean, this is so rough. This is kind of one of the downsides of the Northern Realms deck and why people refer to it as the high roll deck. If you have a bad hand, the game just becomes so out of your control. I mean, you can reinforcements a sergeant, but it always gets answered by Lugos, if not getting answered by something else like a proactive ship snipe. I mean, how do you push this round if you're McBeard here?
You hope they don't have an answer, or you Vishra and hope for a double Kadewani. I don't know. This is not a good hand.
Yeah,
he's gonna pull the Thunder out, which is definitely a smart play. But I don't see how McBeard is getting out of this round.
Yeah, this is definitely ramping up to have the potential to be a 2-0. And of course, he's got the Brick to Vest in hand as well. He's going to have to start trying to get a little bit of value over time with these Knight Elects, but it is a dark situation here for McBeard.
Yeah, this is not good. And here's the thing. So once they pull Kaedwani, yeah, you have the Hensel, but the Kaedwani is going to die. So what are you going to be henseling?
It's got to be Hunters. There's no other choice. Honestly,
yeah, but then you lose round 3.
The only chance McBeard might have here is a hero Dijkstra, right?
Yeah, or if Aya decides to pass for some reason. I mean, as long as Aya plays out this round, it should be over.
Yeah, I mean, what are the resources we're looking at here? We've got Karamet's ability for Quen, typically good protection against Coral, but at the same time, your hunters aren't necessarily being. What if he tries to bait? Ooh, this is actually something I've seen a couple times before in hands like this. What if you bait removal with a hunter, so then you're free to get your sergeants out? You can bait that Lugos out with a hunter.
Yes, you're not wrong. You couldn't do that, but I don't think. I don't know. I mean,
it is absolutely a play of desperation here.
Yeah, I mean, it's all mind games, I guess. We'll see. I mean, McBeard could give it a try. I wouldn't. I mean, at this point, you might just have to go for it.
Yeah. Really. Do not envy McBeard in this situation. I mean, there's just nothing. He just has no grab for this round. This round belongs to Aya. She basically is free to do whatever she wants, and he is just completely shut out of his combo because the pieces aren't drawn and because the Lugos is just there as a threat in Aya's hand. You really have to, at a certain point, just take the Kaedwani and hope that the Lugos isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, you can just hope that your opponent plays their damaging cards such as Lugos, but it's not looking great for McBeard here.
Yeah, I mean, you do have the Igni. The Igni is going to offer value on a pirate captain at the very least if this round does go long, but at the same time, it's not really going to be enough to swing. And you've got some kickers in round 3 if you can get some sergeant traction. You can get your infantrymen, and you still haven't committed the hunters or anything. Like, there's still a lot of potential value. McBeard just has no real way to access it.
Yep, and here we see the Kaedwani. It's going to be instantly answered with the Madman Lugos. And honestly, if I were McBeard, I would just end this game, move on to the next one. This hand, you can't. I mean, you could Dijkstra and hope for like double Kaedwani or something, but we'll have to wait and see. Aya definitely needs to be playing Lugos here, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, just the ability to deny that being Henseled out, especially with the reinforcement. That's the thing about the reinforcement. Like, sometimes in certain matchups, the removal is kind of a risk on the K20 Sergeant, but when you see that reinforcement being played out, you know they have no Sergeant in hand, and you just go ahead and snipe that right off. Denying the K20, in this case, even denying the Reaver Scout as well.
Yep, and here we see the Lugos. We're going to most likely see her hitting a Raider, and the death of K20 will follow with that. Yeah, honestly, I don't know what McBeard's thinking here, except that this game's over.
Yeah, that Knight Elect on the melee row is only ticking up 1 value every turn. If he tries to establish Knight Elects on the siege row to start generating more value, which he needs to do because this round is obviously getting played out long, the Coral is just going to come down at the end and really just smash all that value down again. There is really just not a lot. I mean, the Dijkstra is the only answer here, I think. Like, it has to be insane Dijkstra here. Something like you were saying, pulling 2 sergeants.
Kaedwani, yeah, it's not. I could hit an infantryman. That's the other thing. McBeard doesn't.
Yeah, sergeant infantryman or something like that. I mean, the only question at this point is, when do you actually play the Dijkstra? It's probably better to develop some Knight Elects first, get a little bit of value over time, even though it is maybe doomed to get smashed by a Coral.
Yeah, for sure. I would also save the Dijkstra here. Just in case your opponent decides not to push you out of this round, you can save it for round 3. But we'll see. Yeah, definitely getting value out of these. Every turn, an extra 2 points. It won't really matter because of Coral, but it also forces Aya to have Coral.
Yeah, and another problem with McBeard's hand here is the Reaver Scout. The Reaver Scout being, in this case, completely redundant with a Hensel. Now, if the Dijkstra does find a Sergeant, the Reaver Scout represents another Sergeant. That's actually pretty valuable, but if it doesn't, it's just another completely dead card here. I mean, this Northern Realms deck, it's very, very powerful when it works out, but you take a risk when you play this deck. These games can just happen to you because it's so combo-oriented, and there's so many cards you can't have in your opening hand.
Yeah, it reminds me of some people who decided to play Crones in their monster list.
Ouch. So we have a 13 potential value out of Igni. I mean, this can keep ahead, but there's honestly, I mean, you can't afford to burn your Igni out that early. You have to basically wait for a captain, or maybe in a different scenario, a bigger skirmisher, because that's, those are coming down, and your Igni has to hit those in order to achieve its actual value. I mean, that gives the Igni potential here, and that is enough to stay ahead of Aya. But at the same time, McBeard's not afraid of a pass in this situation. There's no real pressure to try to stay ahead. He knows that Aya is gonna just kind of force him out on more and more cards.
Yep, and McBeard is up 2 cards, so even if they did pass, they would win on equal cards, which isn't an issue. McBeard would be very, very happy if Aya would have passed here with this hand.
Oh yeah, of course. And one thing we haven't even mentioned yet is the Donar just sitting in Aya's hand. Donar being the bane of every Northern Realms deck, the nightmare. I mean, oh no.
Great top deck.
Oh no. And there's the taller.
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh, I think that basically seals it. I mean, he found a Sergeant.
I mean,
but it's just not going to be enough. I mean, this locks him out of the potential for infantrymen, and 2 sergeants won't take him very far without them.
Do you ever consider passing here as Aya? You're 25 points up.
Nah, you can always be more points.
You just keep playing.
The coral mitigates the value. Ooh, there's the pass here.
I mean, I guess the hope is that McBeard can't catch up in 2 cards, and that they have to spend 3. We'll definitely have to see. Kira's obviously always a 17, and they're getting 4 points around.
Kira is a tie right now. It's just not enough, and Aya is fully aware of that. I mean, when you're thinking about a pass, you're thinking about all the possibilities, you're thinking about all the considerations. You're thinking of Igni, you're thinking of Kara, and she knows that neither of those cards is enough for McBeard to be able to win on a single card here. So she's confident she can pass and force that too. Now, if you're McBeard, which 2 cards do you play? Can you do Sergeant, Reaver, Sergeant? Is that enough?
Is Sergeant, Reaver enough? If it is, then that's definitely the line they take.
Yeah, Reaver Scout. Yeah, I think it will be. It should be here. Yeah, it has to be, right?
It's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, McBeard is sitting at a kind of decent scenario here. We still have the infantrymen, and we still have the hunters. And this Henselt is going to go off allowing the hunters to find that round 3 value. I mean, we are sitting at a hand that has value, absolutely. The Kara is there to block the Quen on the hunters as well. The one thing about this is that Donar has a 100% chance to just make you cry, either pulling a hunter or an infantryman.
If you pull infantry, you don't really care. I mean, it sucks, but it's better than a Reaver.
Yeah.
So, honestly, do you just leave the infantry in the deck and hope they get sniped?
I think you might, honestly. I think mulliganing... I mean, I guess at this point, you're probably playing around a narrow win condition, which is assuming they don't have Donar. So, I probably agree with keeping the infantryman in hand, but if you're a pessimist, I think you do actually give away that infantryman. And there's that Quen coming out on these hunters. This Quen doing the very pivotal role of keeping them out of Coral range, because of course blocking single instances of damage doesn't typically help much, but Coral is kind of the one scenario, well, I'm sure you can think of a second one, but Coral is kind of the one effect in the game that really gains value out of it. There's one thing, though. Aya does have the Grimmest in her hand. If she saves it for Fog, plinking off these Gwent shields with that is super valuable.
Yeah, it's not seen very often, but it is definitely a play that makes a lot of sense. Setting up the Coral is huge. However, McBeard can stagger the Reavers, so we'll have to see. But generally, you're going to need that value off of the trio to hit a captain if you're even thinking about winning this round.
So what do you think about McBeard's position here? I mean, he looks, especially given that pass, he is in a much better position than he was last round.
100%. I mean, the pass last round from Aya was questionable. Then again, she doesn't know what McBeard's hand was, but if McBeard was forced to play all his cards, the game was over.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a round 3 where your Northern Realms is happy where it is. Maybe not as happy as it could be, but it's got its Reavers, it's got its Infantrymen. It is good to put down a ridiculous amount of value on the board. The Igni providing a finisher for the Pirate Captain, and the Ulrich in Aya's hand is going to be pretty useless here. It's not really going to see that much value.
Yeah, I think you put down the Redaning here and start picking away. I wonder if McBeard is talking about with his team if Donar is something to consider. F2K is down to 6 cards left in their deck, so there's a pretty high chance that Donar is in the hand. McBeard's just...
That's got to be the Donar. That's
100%,
Donar right there.
Yeah.
So do you see the Hunter or do you see the Infantryman coming out here? At the same time, once one of your Hunters is locked in, especially when you don't have the Operator,
yeah, well,
your other Hunters aren't great either.
You only lost the infantry. It's not the end of the world. But,
yeah, but that is really, really going to diminish his value here on McBeard's side. I mean, you've got the Knight Elect. You've got 12 points on the Infantryman. You've got some decent value on the Hensel, although your trio is out of reach. Not having access to your Operator here is really... That's really, really hurting McBeard's situation.
Well, for sure. Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Uldark most likely is going to be coming on the melee row next turn.
Yep.
He's going to be pulling a Blood-Curdling Roar here. Just nice value here. He needs to make sure to... staggering's not a huge deal. He doesn't have any units that are going to be the same power, so...
The positioning on Uldark is actually slightly interesting here. Depending on whether you put it on the right or the left side of the Knight Elect, it could actually represent potentially getting an extra point out of Coral. Yep. Because of course Coral rounds down, so she damages odd numbered units by more, and one of the units on the left is odd and the other one is even. So
yep. So it's just going to be the timing.
Yep. It just depends when it's a really, really minor calculation. He goes ahead and puts it on the right side, outside of the Knight Elect range, and he's got a ship going out for a little bit of value there as well.
Pulls Jeremy on. Wow. Alright,
yeah.
We're going to get Henseled out on the Reaver Hunters here. The question is, does he... Yeah, he just staggers. There's no reason not to.
And that's a lot of value, and there's still an Igni coming down. That Igni is not going to see value here just because that Ermion and that card advantage. That's rough. If that card drawn wasn't Ermion, if it was like a Pirate Captain or something instead, it would have at least forced the Coral out early. It would have made Aya make the decision about whether you're playing around Whoa! Ooh, the Ermion into a row that enables the Igni.
Yeah, that's very questionable.
Yeah, giving up a little bit of extra value there. The question is, will it be enough? I mean, McBeard is sitting on a 20-ish point advantage, and the Igni is hitting value, as well as the Knight Elects every turn. But, wait. So the Coral here is too much, right? The Coral here is, I think the Coral is just too much. Yeah. It will be pretty close, though. I think Aya has it by a few points.
Don't you wait on Coral?
Yeah, you wait on Coral here.
Yeah, so you play the Pirate.
You get an extra, yeah.
They were mousing Coral.
It actually doesn't matter. They were both odd. Olgierd and Reaver Hunter were both odd numbers. It literally didn't make a difference.
Yeah, this should be enough.
Yeah, so Aya is going to be taking this by 1 point. Oh, wow. A very close game. A great example of...
that hand. Jeez. Wow,
yeah.
that's impressive.
And we mentioned earlier that like that 1 point play, like where you position that Udalric and how you time that coral in regards to that can make a difference in a niche situation. That is a fantastic example of that. Putting the Udalric, if the Udalric was placed wrong, was that a tie?
I'm trying to think.
I don't. Not in that case. It wasn't a tie in that case, but it could have been. So. It like that does actually end up mattering sometimes. Wow. So Aya goes ahead and gets out here. So we've seen. I mean, basically, Commander's Horn is sitting on McBeard. He is their last player left in. He has his Henselt. He needs to win 2 more games against Mithranor's Emir deck and the 3rd deck from Fate to Karma, which we have not seen yet. But McBeard is going to have to win the next 2 in a row. He sees the Mithranor Emir. What do you think about this matchup? Unless these decks lists were changed around.
I mean, there's a lot of cards McBeard doesn't want to be top decking. So, yeah, it's interesting.
McBeard goes ahead and switches up his deck a little bit. He's got Redanian Knights, and he's got Witchers as well. It's an interesting choice. Now, he knows he was against one of 2 decks here, presumably trying to snipe off a specific matchup with this change. Do you think this...
We also see Neneki, so, yeah, the Witchers are coming out twice this game, potentially.
Yeah, maybe. Although Witchers, it's a little irregular to see Witchers outside of a Fultist variant as well.
For sure. Yep.
So what do you think about this swap by McBeard? These Knights. I mean, what do you think he was planning to try to snipe off, like try to counter by making that swap? And like, it's a very interesting decision.
I mean, there's no weather in Mr. Nora's Emir deck.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an 8-point bronze. I don't. I don't know.
It can block Lacerate.
You're not wrong. I don't know if that's a good enough reason to play the card.
Honestly, I mean, what I'm feeling is basically just a little bit of that Henselt deck tilt. Like when you play that deck, when you get that kind of hand that you had in that last game, just those terrible draws over and over again. Sometimes you just want to switch to a more consistent deck that is not so draw reliant, and I suppose that's what he did here.
Question: if he had played a non-unit there, would you have cured Epidemic, the Thaler? Just curious. Would you have done that?
Against Mithranor's deck? I mean, you assume... The only question... The question basically becomes, do you assume that Thunderbolt will lose value in that matchup? Because otherwise, it's the same point as a Thunderbolt potion, right? So you have to ask yourself, do they have Scorches? Do they have D-Bombs? If you assume that the D-Bomb may be in the deck, as it often is in Emir's deck, I don't think it was shown in the previous game unless I'm misremembering, then that Epidemic is pretty good to take.
Here comes a Lacerate. This is going to be fine. You have 2 immune boosts in hand. It's
that is not bad at all. Yeah. So McBeard is starting to generate a little bit of value over time here. He may be looking to force out round 1. After this immune boost is up, he might be looking to do a Henselt into Knight Elect play, which is a huge amount of tempo, and it starts chugging 6 points every turn that Mithranor cannot really deal with.
He does have a Dime Bomb, though, so as long as McBeard staggers these decently, it'll be hitting 2, right? 2 units?
Yeah.
2 units to the right and left of Redanian. I'm still really curious about these. I don't know. It's definitely an interesting deck. I don't know how this beats Mill, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, so against, it's a really difficult matchup to evaluate. I mean, it's not really going to be overdrawing itself against the Mill, right? Like, it's actually pretty relatively resilient. Like, you've got the Henselt and you've got the Witchers pulling out cards, but at the same time, you're not pulling out as many cards as normal Northern Realms does, And you also have Naneki to potentially shuffle some like kind of bronze units back in if you need to in a pinch. You typically want to use her for Witchers or something like Must-Is, but you don't need to here.
Yep, I think it's, the Naneki tech is definitely going to be very good for this deck.
Yeah, so McBeard probably switched to this deck, knowing that Mill was one of the remaining matchups, may have been trying to snipe it off because the normal Handset list, it thins so much that it is a little bit vulnerable to Mill, and this might be his cheeky way of predicting that matchup and seeing if he can counter it properly. We'll have to see how this works out, because it is definitely a regular choice here.
Does he Hensel here? That is the real question. If you do want to Hensel this round, you need to do it sooner than later, though. Obviously, you need to start getting those ticks as soon as possible. Oh,
We see Mithrona going ahead and passing here, not even giving McBeard the option. So McBeard could just end up taking this with a Kara, right? Or do you commit
you're ticking 2 points, so you're at 35. So you need an 11-point play here.
There's no Shawnee target, right? So it just has to be Kara or possibly Henselt if he wants to commit that instead.
It's Kara, Hensel, or high roll Dijkstra. I don't suggest for the high roll, though. Probably not.
I don't think McBeard is necessarily wanting to go for more high rolls either. So he goes for the Kara. This is a pretty good play. It's the least committal way to beat him, and it's putting value in a way that isn't really disruptable by a potential debomb that could happen later. In addition, you're getting value out of the Henselt with the Shawnee into the Knight Elect, into the Henselt next round. And that value can start to really tick up there. This debomb is going to be coming in huge benefit for Mithranar.
So how does this deck play out? I've never even seen this list before. Do you bleed round 2? Or do you just go for the 2-0 since it's Mill? Just hope they don't have their cards.
You probably go for the 2-0 since it's Mill, although at the same time, maybe he thinks that this deck is resistant enough to the Mill to not necessarily need to go for that strategy. I mean, at the same time, neither deck is super really control reliant, so you're not really gaining an incredible advantage out of getting that card advantage from the instant pass here and going directly to round 3. I mean, we're seeing McBeard here not drawing into these Dunbanner heavy cavalries, which are kind of, in a way, what the deck is built around. I mean, it is an armor Northern Realms deck. You've got 2 heavy cavalries, and you want to be able to use those to generate a lot of points. McBeard going for the pass right off.
He's just taking the card advantage, but here's the thing. In the Mill in the Mill matchup, a lot of times card advantage means little to nothing if you get milled. However, they do have the same amount of cards, so Mithranor is going to need to mill everything and then the Sire in order to get card advantage.
And there is that Naneki in a pinch as well, which means McBeard is absolutely safe unless he commits the Naneki to something for value instead of to protect himself for the mill. McBeard is absolutely safe against the potential for being milled here.
Yep, for sure. I mean, you theoretically can decoy a Sire, but it's not likely. If you're doing that, you're not going to be able to fully mill. So McBeard's in a good position here. He should not get fully milled here, especially with Naneki. Now, do you ever play Dijkstra? Because it does thin your deck 2 cards. I guess you just wait till the end of the game and see what your deck looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. I could see considerations either way. But the only thing here, I mean, this D-Bomb is looking juicy. It is up to McBeard to be able to predict this D-Bomb and maybe spread out his Knight Elects enough to be able to mitigate the value, because he has the Shawnee on the one Knight Elect and he has the Henselt, which doesn't really gain value out of pulling the other 2. In addition, he knows this is a long round 3, so he'll definitely go for the Knight Elects. The only question is, does he spread them out enough? Does he predict the D-Bomb in the Emir list?
From every list I've ever seen from Mill, they always have D-Bomb. Yes, Mithranor didn't show the card last game. He mulliganed it away. But McBeard definitely has to be playing around it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is this Dijkstra possibly pulling here? I mean, he can't Dijkstra before he's gotten, Reaver Scout targets, heavy cavalry targets, which means he needs to play some knights out. He needs to play, some maybe knights will probably be enough. Knights and elites. What do you pull with this reinforcement if you're McBeard? Does that depend on the Dijkstra?
I think you wait for the Avaloq. You just be patient. Because Avaloq is going to come out sooner than later, right?
Yeah.
Also, F2K does not have shackles, which means unless they top deck the shackles here, they might be forced to dime bomb their own Avaloq.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Would be very good for McBeard.
That would be great for McBeard.
Yeah, you can Assire the dime bomb, but it does mean you have to draw into it. So we'll see what the two top decks here. He pulls shackles. That's huge. All right, so that's definitely a very good top deck there. The Sarah. What other golds does he have left in this deck?
Tibor? Or does he not run Tibor?
Don't know. We didn't find out. Here comes the shackles.
Yeah, the shackles being huge, as you said, allows him to not have to commit the D-bomb here and just can use it for a huge value play. At the same time, McBeard drawing the Knight Elect, which really hurts his ability to get Henselt value here. I mean, there's no way, without doing anything very strange with Neneki, to be able to get a Henselt for 2 additional cards from your deck here. You'd have to Neneki the last Knight into your deck, and at that point, do you even really want to do that?
No, I don't think so. Okay. So he's not gonna... do you ever hit the Witchers with Neneki and then Dijkstra into them? You always have to do. It's not that bad, right?
You would probably wait and see how much milling is going to be happening from the Emir player here and how thin your deck is going to get before committing Neneki to one way or another, because you have the Dijkstra and reinforcements and Henselt in hand. Henselt pulls 1, reinforcements pulls 1, Dijkstra pulls 2. Therefore, McBeard is effectively sitting, after drawing these last 2 cards, on a 1-card deck right now. And that's making me think that, especially because he can see that decoy and he knows that card is going to be gone, and he can infer an Albric as well. That's 3 more draws. I think you have to use Neneki just for kind of bronze units to be able to get value out of again, including his last Knight Elect. Or, no, sorry, his last one's in his deck.
Is Henselt even going to be played this game?
It might not be.
I mean, you just play it for 2 points, right?
You play it for the heavy cavalry, I think. Like, as soon as you draw that first heavy cavalry and you play it out, you play the Henselt to pull the other one, and then you've got the Neneki being a backer preventing you from overdrawing as you pull out cards with Henselt. There's a Dandelion. He's going to have to use that Dandelion right now. You have to use it immediately.
Right now.
Yep. You know you're being drawn out of all your cards, and you need to get that value. That is good value from him too, though. Those additional 17 points. But I'm looking at this D-Bomb, and this D-Bomb is going to be a huge finisher here always. I mean, it's completely erasing all of the value out of these Knight Elects, and that's kind of McBeard's stay into this round.
Yeah, for sure. Also, another note, if he is going to be playing Witchers, which I know you talked about he might not do, but he should have played around that and not stacked his units melee row.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't necessarily have to commit to that.
Alright, so we see the Vogaforts. So there's no Tibor in this list.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, that Vogaforce is going to get good value. Generally, you mill your opponent's entire deck, and the Vogaforce is free.
Yeah, so the Vogaforce will be able to kill something like an 11 strength Knight Elect, or maybe a 12 strength heavy cavalry even, achieving a 20 points for a gold card. Pretty good.
Also notice the Swears in hand, which means if you do Neneki bronze units, there is a potential that Swears just hits them off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, he will know exactly what gets Neneki'd, and he will know exactly what to Swears. That could be a big deal. McBeard could be milled out here even after Nenekiing. That's pretty crazy.
I mean, I mean, you have Reaver, Scout, and Dijkstra in hand, which are both basically useless, and reinforcement.
Yeah, and he still has these 2 heavy cavalries in deck. I mean, you are looking... This deck is built around the idea of heavy cavalry, heavy cavalrying these Knight Elects, and he will find one off of these mills, but he probably would have really liked one in round 1. It would have made that round 1 finisher much more flexible.
Yeah, for sure. Being forced to play Kira in round 1 isn't ideal, but it was necessary. matchup.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest benefits towards playing this armor archetype is that you have huge reach. When you're playing Knight Elects and when you're playing Heavy Cavalries, you have a reach of 22. If you have 2 Knight Elects on board and a Heavy Cavalry in your hand, you have 22 swing off of a bronze. That is gigantic, and that is a large part of the value that these decks give you, but you can't get that if you don't draw into your Heavy Cavalry on the first round, when reach really actually matters.
So, does he has to hit the witches, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, he doesn't see the Swears. He's just going bronze. Yeah. The Thunderbolt Potion from Karamet. That is coming in handy here. It is he is not vulnerable to a Swears more so than he'll get his last Knight Elect forced out. And that will definitely do something, but he's not making himself too vulnerable.
Yeah, and these Elects are just they're going. So yeah, the Dime Bomb's going to be very crucial here.
Wait, did he discard the Knight instead of the Elect? McBeard's tracker says Knight Elect is in deck and Knight is in graveyard.
Because here's the thing, Mithranor doesn't actually know if Elect is in hand or in deck. Right? We know that because we can see the deck tracker.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
The safe play is to hit the other because it's 100%.
Yep. So he still has the 3rd Knight Elect, and he'll be able to put it in a row that's not vulnerable to D-Bomb this time. You kind of want to start spreading out your units as much as possible, right? If you're McBeard, if you're playing around the idea for D-Bomb, you know these Elects are kind of like stacking, and you've got some units you can play out melee. Most namely, this last Knight that you have. You can play that Knight melee, and you can use it to try to provide a bit of a buffer against D-Bomb value here, in a minor way at least.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see what McBeard does here. My guess is you play it in between the 2 Elects.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's a good play. That's a heads up play. That means you know the D-Bomb is a threat and you are playing around it. I really like that play, and I'm seeing a lot of value in McBeard's hand. Like he's ready against the mill. He's got the Knight. These Heavy Cavalries, when they come down, these Heavy Cavalries are swinging for 25 points each. Well, the first one's 25, the second one is 20. Well, no, it's like 22 or something, but they're very good. But I'm looking at this D-Bomb, and this
I don't think it's going to matter.
D-Bomb. You think McBeard just takes?
If you could D-Bomb twice, maybe, but the Sire's down. So unless you decoy D-Bomb, you could do it with Stefan Vilgefortz. You hit one of your own cards.
That is actually pretty funny. I wonder if there's a consideration for that. That would be that's a really, really unique play.
It is.
He's Stefaning early here.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. And McBeard is just chugging along here. The one thing about the mill archetype is that, of course, drawing rounds extends those rounds because every turn is a card. So when you're playing against someone who gains value over time, e.g. these Knight Elects, you're really feeding them the points that they want. I mean, this round is going on. What is this looking to be, like a 14-turn round or something like that?
Yeah, it's nuts. And with the Elects ticking every single turn, it is not looking great for Mithranor. Yes, the D-Bomb is there, so that will be his saving grace, potentially. But you also have to realize the Dunbanner Heavy Cavalry that you've been mentioning, it's going to be a massive swing. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, he's thinking about this Reaver Scout. This would pull out the last Knight Elect. He's committing the Scout here instead of the Henselt. He might be going for the Henselt, I guess, just conceding that it'll be dead. What do you think about the Scout over the Henselt? What?
I think they're looking for the immune boost on the middle row. That would be my guess.
Yep.
Both boosts top deck, so still no cavalry.
Man, these heavy cavalries are coming up for an absolutely immense amount of power, and we're seeing McBeard here. He's got some bricked cards. He's got a completely dead Henselt. He's got a completely dead Dijkstra, even offering negative points. But at the same time, his heavy cavalries and his Knight Elects and his elites are just putting an immense amount of power on the board.
Honestly, I think double D-Bomb was the only way Mithranor has a chance at this. There's too many boosts. Like, I don't even think
this Vilgefortz is going off.
It's going off for 17, right? Or it depends on where he wants to hit this. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, as you mentioned, he does have a dead Dijkstra. That's really it. The reinforcement is still going to be hitting the Dunbanner Heavy Cavalry.
So the biggest variable in Mithra Sand here is Sarah. He's playing it out. What is this Sarah hitting? He's hitting the Nilf Knight and drawing into the Foot Soldiers. That's pretty much what you want. He's going to be able to redraw that last Nilfgaardi Knight from his deck here as well from that.
Yep, that's just a free 4 power. It's nice. Every point's going to matter here for Mythanor. That Lacerate is not doing ever lacerate middle at some point to try to deny the armor value?
No, I don't think so. I'm not sure what you try to get with that lacerate here. It is really, really not hitting for value, almost no matter what.
You can't go front and going. You go back and stop the elect from boosting.
Yeah. So, I mean, the D-bomb on the melee row is hitting, effectively, it's getting already in the 30-point range. The D-bomb swings for 30. These potions are huge. Vilgefortz flips back on a heavy cavalry. One of these heavy cavalries is going to absorb just a ridiculous amount of armor, and that's going to be absolutely huge. It's a pretty interesting deck. We haven't really seen the armor archetype being explored. What do you think about the application here? I really actually rather like it.
It's working great. I'm surprised he didn't stagger his 12s in the middle. He could have definitely positioned them out of D-bomb range.
With Insult. But then you're putting yourself out of immune boost range too, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And D-bomb's most likely going to be going front row, so... Yeah. So what, you Vilgefortz the Dunbanner Heavy Cavalry, most likely?
Absolutely. This is going to be a huge cavalry. This is looking to be a 30-ish point cavalry at 27. It's looking like there. And then the other cavalry, well, actually, he can split them up. He can eat one of the 10s with one cavalry and one of the 10s with another cavalry. And he knows that Vilgefortz is there as a threat. So he presumably will, but... I mean, is that enough for McBeard to just take it? His hand is not really generating that much value, but the Lacerate from Mythranor isn't really doing much as well.
You have Dunbanner. You have Last Say, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you have Last Say.
Last Say, right? And when you top deck your Dunbanner, you just play it on lower armor units.
Yeah, I think Dijkstra might have to be Last Say here. Like, you would have to play Dijkstra early. So basically, the consideration Pumpkin's talking about, he's saying that Dijkstra is a card that, since it's completely dead, and since it's just representing negative points, you have a choice. You can play it early and eat that -3 points to give you the ability to play a card after the end of your opponent's card. In this case, Heavy Cavalry, probably. Or you can try to just basically ignore its presence in your hand and just not have to cost 3 points.
I'm pretty sure you play it. You play it, and then so you play Immune Boost, you Dijkstra, you Reinforcement for nothing, and then you
And there is a huge Heavy Cavalry. This animation. Is he?
Surprised he's going this early.
Well, at the same time, I mean, you're not really able to avoid it, right? Like two cavalries are coming out no matter what.
No, but you can play the cavalry on. Not those units. You can play it on any other 2 units, and you just play that as your last card, and you get a 27. Now this is getting Vilgefortz. You could have completely avoided this with Dijkstra, Reinforcement into Immune into Cavalry as your last card.
Yeah, that's true. And we're seeing a really, really huge round 3 here. I mean, McBeard has 200 points developed on his board, and he is not done yet. Mythanor is going to be able to smash those points as best he can with his D-bomb and his Vilgefortz, but like you're saying, it might just not be enough. I mean, the cards are big, but it's not looking great for Mythanor.
It's not looking great. This D-bomb, we'll have to wait and see. You just Immune Boost here?
I think so, yeah. You would probably have to. Yeah, Immune Boost middle, I think.
Immune Boost into... It doesn't matter.
That last night shows that D-bomb there finally, right? Like that D-bomb is up. And he knows, his suspicions are confirmed. He was obviously playing around it with that Verdanian Knight earlier. There's that Vilgefortz coming out. That's going to just swing a pretty good amount of value. Normally, you're very happy about your bronzes being 30 points, but in this case, it's just not going to be enough as we see this heavy cavalry coming out here. I'm a huge fan of this armor deck. They predicted very well that they would play against that mill deck again, and they were able to hit that matchup and just completely shut out the mill deck's ability to really... I mean, if the mill deck can't run you out of cards, they just don't have the power.
Yeah, I mean, mill needs to rely on milling for their power. They don't inherently have very much power. You can see here that they have 120, but then again, normally round 3 doesn't go this long, but it definitely helps the Hensel.
So that is going to be our first set. Commander's Horn Commandos taking it 3-1 against Fade to Karma Group 3. What do you think about that set, Pumpkin Shit? Or Sir Pumpkin?
Either's fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, no problem.
Very close games. The upset in the first round, Hyper Thin against Mill was very surprising. That brain tech was huge. I really like that. But yeah, it definitely... You could see Commander's Horn doing a great job against the Emhyr decks.
Yeah, I really actually liked that NR armor thing. I think that having that on your roster and switching to that when they did was a really great play. I think it ended up closing out the series. HG3 Jagaris, our hosts, what did you guys think of that set?
Hey, what's up, Swim? Thank you for that cast, Swim and Pumpkin. What did you think of that set, Jagaris? What a set from Commander's Horn.
I thought it was great. I'm really happy it wasn't a 3-0 sweep, so then I can say that I was right. That's always nice to do. But I had some really interesting games. You can see kind of a little bit how almost the TGI meta has been shifting as each week goes on. We've seen this armor deck right at the end, which I thought was really cool to watch. A lot of people have been playing Reavers quite consistently throughout the tournament. So seeing something a bit out of left field and seeing it succeed like that is really cool to see. I do feel like Mill is starting to struggle a bit in TGI now. How do you feel?
Well, let me say this. That deck that McBeard ran in that last game, as someone that's played a lot of NR, that's the type of deck that would give me nightmares. That is not a standard deck. That's heavily teched for certain matchups, and it worked well in the matchup against NG because Northern Realms bronzes are just a class above Nilfgaard bronzes right now, in my opinion. But they could have teched it differently too and still done well if they anticipated the mill matchup. I think the reason they went that direction was because the possibility of Ethne was still in the pool. So that kind of had a little bit of flair so that Ethne wouldn't do much to it too. But with Henselt, if you put Naneka in the deck, if you have Shani in the deck, if you're afraid of Ethne and you throw in Dandelion for something like Igni, you can be prepared for a couple of those matchups. So I do like the decision to leave McBeard as the anchor on that team, ready to play with Henselt. He resurrected a dead meme. I think the Harlem Shake is now back. And so, props to him for that as well. A great performance despite the conditions.
Oh, definitely. I think it was a really fun set to watch. It's always also cool to see a game that comes down to 1 point. A lot of people, you make misplays. You're like, 1 point, it doesn't really matter. But in that game 3, it really did come down to just that 1 point that allowed FTK Team 2 to at least take one match. It's a shame that we didn't go to game 5. I always like to see 5 games. I think it's just the most interesting. But honestly, it was just a really strong set out of the Commandos, with their first game just completely dominating with this 2-0 into the second game, controlling kind of the pacing of the game into the third game. Admittedly, the draws weren't amazing that game for the Northern Realms team, for the Commandos, but that fourth game right at the end, it was just completely fantastic to see. And it is what the Commandos needed, because in terms of their standings, they're now 1-1-1, which is a bit strange.
Yeah, a very unique position to be in the tournament. We don't see many teams that have a draw, but in their position with 3 weeks to go, at the end of today's going to mark the halfway point for the regular season. They likely need to win out to have any shot at playoffs. And like I said, these are a proud group of players. They have a lot on the line. They want to be a part of the playoffs. So if they keep momentum like that, There's plenty of examples in their match of specific teching for some matchups. They had Thunder in their Ithni deck, probably anticipating a Skellige opening or a Mill opening that's good against. They had Decoy in the Queensguard deck. I have no idea why it was there. Maybe to try and use an extra Donar, which is like an absolute win condition against some decks, like if you can just RNG it heavy. So I think they really put some good effort into this, and we'll see what they can continue to do moving forward. And now we have a next matchup on our slate, and this is a really big one. This is going to be, let me just make sure I get the team names right, because it's really hard, even though I've already casted Merchant's team, to remember the name. Team XD Esports International with the Merchanters. We've already seen them on stream once, and they'll be playing against Card Game Nerds.
Definitely, and this is definitely one to watch. I mean, we know that XD Esports is 2-0 up, so are Card Game Nerds, so they've been pretty consistent, and Team Merchant, Team XD Esports International has been a bit of a powerhouse, so far in the tournament. They've definitely been winning games, but with the team comp, you're not going to really be that surprised by that. We've got Merchant, then there's Petrify, the Australian sensation, and Trudon. So, big community names there, and living up to their reputation, which is really unsurprising. But what about our Card Game Nerds? How do you feel like they shape up?
I think they're an interesting team, but we are actually going to save that for our preview after a brief intermission. So don't go anywhere. This is an undefeated matchup coming up. You guys want to see what happens here, because this could determine a lot moving forward. Stay tuned. We're going to jump to intermission right now, and afterwards we'll have the match for you.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Gwentlemen Invitational Week 3. And we have a donation, so I'm going to have to read out this very interestingly grammared message from Gravez. And if you want to hear us read out strange messages and support, the teams taking part in the Gwentlemen Invitational, then you should be donating. So we have $5, and the pauses are where the commas are, people. Okay, so this is not me being unable to read. Once you have been in a McBarthquake, you know, even if you survive without a scratch, that little a stroke in the heart, it remains in the earth's breast, horribly potential, always prone missing to return, to hit you again, with an even more devastating force. This sounds like someone has basically put a message into Google Translate, and then this is what we've kind of ended up with. But thank you so much, Gravez, for the $5 towards the rewards. But I'm back with HG3. Are you excited for the second series?
I am, and you know, that donation, I don't know how to interpret it either, but the memes are real, and I'm sure that match didn't help suppress them at all with the way the video unfortunately went. So I'm ready to go. I think looking at the teams, I mean, you talked a bit about XD Esports International before the break. Their opponents are card game nerds, and this is a team that has a couple of familiar figures. The captain is Smoone, and he's a streamer that I'm sure a lot of people have seen streaming. I think he became very popular when he came up with a unique variant of Scoia'tael list a month or so ago. It featured some smugglers, which had fallen out of favor. It was a very interesting deck and quite strong. So I've had an eye on, you know, this player in terms of seeing how innovative he can be, what he can contribute in terms of developing some deck ideas. And this team in general has been performing well, so I'm excited to see how they match up against a sort of proven veteran team in Team XD Esports International.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting one to watch. I'm also just excited to see what sort of decks people are bringing, because I know that, you know, Discard has been very popular, Scoia'tael Control has been very popular, and a lot of people have been running Mill. But then because a lot of people have been running Mill, you started to see, I know some players have been running, you know, 25, well, more than 25 card decks, you know, 30, 35, even some 40 card decks have been getting played just to kind of deal with that possibility. And if you've got strong bronzes within your faction, it is something that you can potentially look to do. So I think it'll be interesting to see what decks XD Esports International bring and what decks Card Game Nerds bring, especially also as Team XD Esports International has had some of their games broadcast, which means maybe Card Game Nerds has the edge in that they've seen how they play.
Yeah, that could be very helpful, actually. That's something that I didn't take into account. But, you know, seeing the way a team plays and even maybe associating some leaders with team members could be really helpful in the blind pick phase, because you do know which team member you're going up against. You don't know what they're playing at first. So there's some information to be had there. I think in terms of looking out for certain types of decks we haven't seen, I don't believe we've seen much of Dwarves yet. They're kind of pushed out by some of the control decks, but still very strong and have some potential, some windows where they could take victories. And then to couple with that, I mean, Dagon's been banned almost unilaterally. Like, who is going to unleash the beast? Like, someone's going to try and conquer Dagon. There are some decks out there that could beat him. There's an Axeman deck that we haven't seen much of that has a niche. There's potential to see a lot more moving forward. Are people going to hold on to it for playoffs, or will we see it now? We're going to get ready for that game. What's your prediction before we jump into it?
I mean, I gotta give it to Team XD Esports International. I've known Merchant since before Gwent, like back when he worked on RuneScape and worked on the Chronicle RuneScape card game. So like, we go back far enough that I feel like I can't bet against him. You know, he gave me my Gwent beta key, so I have to give him a little bit of a shout out. But again, I hope it's not a 3-0. It's always good to see more than 3 games, and I think that given that these are both 3-0 teams so far, you know, they've both won 3 series. Hopefully it'll be a close one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I could see it being a close one. I mean, both teams with recognizable players, and getting to that point being 3-0 is definitely a landmark. So we'll see which team's going to be able to accomplish it. For this game, we have Vishra and Impetuous Panda ready with the commentary. We're going to toss it over to them now. Good luck, boys. Take it over.
Thank you very much, HG. With me today is Impetuous Panda. I am Vishra. How's it going, Panda?
It's going pretty well. I think we're going to have a really good match here. We have 2 very good teams, very good names as well, I think. So hopefully it's a really good match for sure, and hopefully it's close as well. Not a 3-0, as Jagger said.
Yeah, Team XD Esports is actually one that going into the tournament had a bit of hype around them, but they were kind of overshadowed by a few other teams that have actually fallen by the wayside, and so far they put up 2 fairly dominant weeks to this point. So I'm actually really interested to see how they do here against a team that is generally considered to be maybe not one of the favorites in the tournament, but definitely one of the higher ranked teams. They definitely have a more competitive lineup overall, so this is actually a really big test for both of these lineups. But we should see really good matches from both teams here, as we can lead out the gate here with our first game. We'll see just how good these 2 teams are, and we'll see who each team leads off with. We do see Petrify for XD Esports leading off with Henselt against Eskrin, I believe on the Eridan, on the Emir, excuse me. Now, what's
Yeah,
your
so-
thought on this matchup overall?
Mill's always a very interesting deck. It changes how the game's played a lot at the very fundamental level. And I think Petrify running Hensel, which runs a lot of cards that normally thin, like Reinforcements and Dijkstra, and March Orange, for example, especially some variants that run, pretty much all the thinning cards that it can run, is going to have a very, very hard matchup, I think. It does have a lot of power levels, a very high power level with Reaver Hunters in round 3, for example, and the Knight Elects as well, so it's going to be tough to see what wins.
Yeah, generally this is a matchup that I would lean fairly heavily in the Ymir deck's favor, simply because there's not much that the Hensel deck can do to stop itself from thinning, right? A huge part of its strategy relies on just finding those cards, digging them out of the way, because if they have them in their hand, they're not that great, and generally they can't, then if they draw them, they can't actually get to the cards they need to win the game. This could be a situation where we have to see the Hensel deck actually take the initiative here and try to 2-0 their opponent, so the coin flip here could actually factor very heavily into who wins this and who loses it, as we see both teams taking their time to figure out what the mulligans are here.
Yeah, 2-0ing is definitely an option against Mill decks, because that last round 3, when you don't really have a top deck, because you don't have cards in your deck, is always pretty bad. The worst thing, I think, with the Hensel deck, like you said before, is that it doesn't have the option to not thin. King Brand can choose to not discard, Pirates cannot be discarded in the King Brand matchup against Mill, so there are some ways to play around it, but there really isn't any way to do it in this matchup, so it's going to be interesting to see how Petrify tries and maybe play around that, really, but I don't think there's going to be a way to do it.
Yeah, and looking at the opening hands here, you see both teams basically come out with the hands that they could, the best hands they could possibly want. Card Game Nerds leads off with the triple Alchemist, double Foot Soldier hand, as well as having Avalok and the D-Bomb if they wanted to use that right away. They can get their engine going almost immediately here with a hand this heavily focused towards drawing. On the other side, we see XD Esports having the Kadwani Sergeant opening with no dead cards in hand, which is actually a huge deal for this deck. It's a deck that's notorious for just having some of the worst opening hands imaginable here. So each team getting off to a very good start here.
It's going to be interesting to see when Eskrin chooses to play the Avalak, because you have to take into account that it does thin the opponent of cards, but the more it waits, the higher value the thinning is, because Petrify is going to thin himself really with the Commandos and the Reaver and the Sergeant. So if you would have maybe waited with the Avalak, it could also make it so he thins cards that Petrify wouldn't thin otherwise. So, but it would be like a more effective mill, essentially.
And we see him actually get punished here with the Pikeman draw, which is actually huge here, although it was his first draw, so even if he had gone with the Alchemist line into the Foot Soldier, he still would have drawn it. But that's actually a pretty big deal here. He also is lacking tools. He has the Ymir, he has the Decoy for the Avalok, but he has to actually commit to that play this round. And one play that I have seen here that I kind of would have liked to have seen XD Esports at least stop and consider is that when the opponent slams that Avalak in round 1 and then they're ahead on the board, some teams have elected just to simply pass there, because it still forces the opposing team to actually play out at minimum one card there to make their Avalak a silver. If they don't, they effectively lose their win condition in this matchup if they don't do that and then sire it back into their deck. So I think that would have been a line that I would have liked to at least seen them take a shot and, stop and think about it. They kind of slammed that other Sergeant out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think card advantage and rounds don't mean much in a mill matchup, to be honest. It's mostly just controlling how much your opponent can mill you and how much you can get milled. And I think passing on a Golden Avalak is one of the best strategies you can do in round 1. It's one I personally employ as well. And it normally makes it so you have to at least shaggle the Avalak and also take it back with a mirror, so it's 2 more cards that the opponent is wasting.
Yeah, as we see them go ahead, they do play marching orders in their deck, which is actually a tech option that I don't really see that often. I haven't even seen it on ladder, to be honest, but I actually like it in this deck in almost every matchup except this one, as it is just sitting them by yet another 2 cards out of their deck. But they're going for the fairly aggressive line here. They're deciding that they're going to try to force round 1, make this an issue for Card Game Nerds, and then just probably see if they can get into round 3 without being decked too deeply. I don't really like their position here, to be honest, though. They have a Thaler and a Dijkstra in hand, and they just thinned an additional 2 cards that they didn't need to. So this could be a situation where Card Game Nerds can force the round. Even if they don't win this round, they could thin this deck to the point of no return.
Yeah, it's really a matchup where it's one of the most unfavored matchups there are right now in the current meta, I think. Because, like you said before, there's just no way to stop thinning your deck. Like, you're kind of obligated to thin your deck. You have cards that either, like, if you discard them, you're going to draw them later and they'll be dead anyway. So it's very tough to play around this kind of stuff. Maybe passing on the Avalak was the correct choice, but like you said, it's just really, really hard to play against this mill strategy with Hensel.
Now, how do you think that the Naneki factors into this? Because we do see that they are playing the Naneki here, and they do have Shani available. So theoretically, if they line this up properly, they could add an additional 6 cards back in their deck. Do you think they need to look at that as their win condition this match? Or is there another line that they can take here to try to win this besides going for just the very aggressive 2-0 strategy?
I think that's the only way, really. I mean, if they thin their deck normally and they don't put cards back in, they're going to get milled 100%, and they're going to be losing so much value for every card that they don't draw. So it's really the only way I think they're going to beat this matchup. It's also a tech card that people don't run as much. I haven't seen Neneki in a lot of decks in ladder, to be honest. So maybe they were expecting the mill and they teched in the Neneki as a counter to that, and maybe as the win condition, like you said. So maybe they were expecting the matchup. They didn't ban it for a reason. They allowed Dagon to get banned and allowed Amir to pass on through. And they're going to use that Neneki to kind of turn the tables and be able to draw into cards later on in round 2 and 3.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those situations where when you see Amir's left on the table, you have to expect your opponent to lead with it in this kind of a format when Bran exists, when Ithne decks exist, and if your opponent's playing those two plus a Hensel deck, which they very likely could be playing, it seems like it's a pretty logical thing to lead on. So I really like this adaptation from XD Esports, as we see card game nerds have to take the 0 tempo play to finally make their Avalak be online for their bounce effects. But now, looking at their hand, they have Amir, Kahir, and Decoy. They have every single bounce effect they need in their hand here, so they can start getting serious amounts of mill on here if they do choose to go that route next turn, which you'd have to expect that they would do here.
Yeah, it's going to get ugly very fast for Team XD Esports. They really can't stop this Avalak. They don't have another way to stop the Avalak, obviously, if it does get shackled or debomb, is to destroy it before it can get decoyed or Amired. But there really isn't an option to do that. There's no Igni possibility with Dijkstra because there's only 12 points on that front row. So there really isn't a way to do that. King Bran, for example, can sometimes do it with Lugo, so they have a long chip on board, but Handel does not have that targeted removal that they need.
And at this point, if you're Team XD Esports, you just kind of have to figure out what you can play here that'll let you continue to pressure this round without spending too many cards. As we actually see them elect to pass here, which I think is very interesting. I'm not sure I like this play, actually, because your opponent still is in a mirror online. They're only losing 2 points bouncing Avalak back. So they only need, what, an 8-point play out of hand here, which the Alchemist into the Foot Soldiers does very easily here.
And the last rate, of course, because there's a very stacked range row right now for Team XD Esports. So yeah, I think
absolutely.
They maybe regret not passing earlier. I think it was maybe the correct play. It's hard to really know in these matchups because they play so differently to normal matchups on ladder. You play so many games on ladder and you grind and you know like all the matchups inside out. But Mill isn't really a deck that you see too much on ladder, so it's kind of hard to play it optimally, I think, against it and when you're playing it yourself. Yeah,
it turns out that when your deck has a fairly unwinnable monsters matchup, you really won't get to play it on ladder that much, shockingly. As we do see them elect to go with the Lacerate play here. I do actually like that play better than their other options. Just getting out of the way now, you're not really going to get much better value over the course of the game against the Hensel deck than that. And it's going forward, they have a lot more tools that they'd rather keep in their hand. So I do like that play from them. But like we were talking about, I think that if XD Esports had passed earlier, they would still have 4 additional bronzes in their deck, which would be more than enough to probably negate this Avalak, as we do see a Swears pickup from Card Games Nerds, which could be huge with this Neneki draw, actually. If they can actually hold it to that point. That's one thing that's a bit of a rough decision in this matchup, is that there's 2 different breeds of the Hensel deck. One will play the Neneki Shani combo and one won't. And if you wait for the Neneki combo, you can actually, it's just a back-breaking play to Swears them after the fact.
Yeah, I think it's Swears is one of the only RNG heavy cards, I think, in the, although not always RNG, because you can, kind of interpret what your opponent has in his deck in the way he plays, but it's one of the only cards that doesn't have fixed mill value in the mill deck. So it's always sometimes one of the factors that really decides matches, because you're always going to get 2 cards from Avalak, 1 card from Albersh, etc. But Swears can sometimes range from 0 to 2 cards, so it's definitely a very, very, very important effect in this matchup.
I just want to see a treason. Like, why is that so much to ask? Come on, people. You're bringing a mill deck to this tournament? Bring a treason along.
I think the deck gets a bit too memey at that point. It's
I don't know. It's a good card. It's an underrated card. Okay. If we're going this deep, we're gonna go whole hog with it. As we do see them lead with the Alchemist. Card Game Nerds decides that they do have to just start getting pressure out nice and early here. They are down a significant advantage here in terms of overall cards in their deck. We are seeing the 27 card list out of Team XD Esports, giving them a little bit of a pause right now, but they will be able to draw plenty like we talked about. They have the Avalak, the Decoy, the Kahir. They even have Stefan Skellen in hand, so they can even stack their deck for whatever card they might want in a future draw. I would expect to see them actually hold that, though, and at least see what the first Avalak and maybe the first bounce effect with the Decoy would give them.
Swears is also an interesting card, especially against Hensel, because it almost counters Hensel. Because to play Hensel, you want to obviously have a unit that you can draw more units from your deck, but you need it on board to use the Hensel's power. So Swears almost negates it entirely. Obviously in this matchup though, Petrify probably won't be looking to use Hensel in a standard fashion. He won't want to get any units out, probably will be dead. But it's interesting because the moment you play a bronze unit on board, Swears has that potential to just block the Hensel, essentially.
Yeah, and I could actually see an argument for him to just play it this round, like right here. Pulling one Night Elect out isn't that bad of a play. It's still giving you a +2 per turn, so you're going to get extra value out of it. You know your opponent still has Avalok in hand, and at this point, with only 7 cards in deck, you have to expect that they have part of their engine there as well, so they have like a hero, the decoy most likely. So it's not that bad of a play in my opinion. We'll see whether or not they go for it. As it turns out, Card Game Nerds wants to press their advantage here, and they want to lead off with a Cow Carcass here, and maybe try to clear that Night Elect out before it can get too much value this round.
Yeah, we'll probably see a lock here. I mean, there really isn't any reason not to. There's not any unit you want to lock other than Rot Tossers in this matchup, I think. There's really just, and Pikeman in the beginning, but obviously that opportunity is passed, so there's not really. There's also a shout for Epidemic, but I think that wouldn't be the correct play at all. It's a possibility, though. If
they hold the Epidemic here, they're much more likely to maybe hit the Dalaran Foot Soldier. The Vic of Aromatic that we see in Card Game Nerd's hand is actually a fairly uncommon card choice these days in this deck. It used to be a card that people would run, but since the deck has become a bit more streamlined, you don't really see it that often. So they might expect they can sit on the Kira Mets for at least a little bit longer and potentially find a much more higher value, maybe like hitting 2 Foot Soldiers, potentially even more than that. As we see, XT Esports actually play into this a bit. I'm a bit surprised by this line, actually.
Yeah, with Rot Tossers, it's always almost better to always... Yeah, we see the Swears coming in, like I said. It just blocks the Hensel completely if that was what Petrify had in mind. So it's always better to play proactively with Rot Tossers because there are plays that sometimes force you to do a certain play after the opponent does it. So it's always better to have that Rot Tosser under control before it goes to that last, the final tick, depending on the matchup, of course, but it's almost always a good rule to follow, I think.
And one nice thing about the Margarita here that is basically unique to her specifically is that if their opponent was running Oxia, which they aren't, or at least they don't have it in hand, since she resets the unit itself, they actually can't just unlock it with the Ox, since Ox will do 1 damage. But if it was buffed and it was any other of the locking units, it would have actually just unlocked it and kept it at 2 strength. So it's actually a nice little backup, if you want, if you would call it that, where you can actually unlock it and continue the chain with it. So really nice play by them. But they get punished here for the Reaver Hunter play. As we see, Card Game Nerds immediately go for the... Oh, wait, really? They're taking the Redain Night Elect? I expected them to instantly take the Reaver Hunter there. That's actually a huge deal.
I think they're probably not thinking about Aneki, because I think it hasn't been played too much this patch, or at least maybe it has. I'm not super familiar with Hensel. I just don't play in my own Hensel deck, so maybe that's why. But maybe they're just not counting on Aneki being a thing in Petrify's deck. So, because yeah, you're right. Taking that Reaver Hunter out of the graveyard is almost like, you know, a Donar taking a Reaver Hunter from the deck when you have Aneki in hand. So maybe it was correct to take that. They're just looking for value now, hopefully. I think Eskrin knows that his deck doesn't have inherently large power values. It just relies on milling to win games, not really on big power plays. So maybe that's why they want to get the Night Elect. They want some value over time over this long round, and maybe that's what they're going for.
Yeah. To me, I think that I wouldn't even risk that. I would immediately just take it just to make sure. You don't want. I think that that's probably one of the few ways that Team XD Esports can actually wind up winning this game is an Aneki combo and having some kind of shenanigans with Reaver Hunters round 3 at this point. You know that you're set up really well in hand. You know that you have the Avalok, the Decoy, the Stefan. You know that you're going to get off basically anything you could want. So why risk it? Honestly, just start taking the Reaver Hunters. You can even decoy the Vic of Aromatic there if you want, just to seal it up. I don't think that you need to there. I think just taking a single Reaver Hunter probably puts you in a winning position there.
Yeah, especially with a combo like Henselt or Dijkstra to bring out those Reaver Hunters in round 3 and do so in very few plays. Unlike maybe a normal round 3 where you have to have 3 or 4 Reaver Hunters in hand, you can do a combo with a Neki where you draw multiple with Dijkstra, and that can maybe win you the game just from the sheer power of drawing multiple Reaver Hunters into a single row.
Now, if you're Card Game Nerds, how deep are you playing this round? You do still have the Avalak with 2 ways to reuse it, so you do have 6 potential extra cards here. Maybe even more, depending if you get Albric, a Sire, what else you have in the deck at this point. So how deep are you planning to take this?
I'd honestly go all the way as long as my tempo plays aren't falling too far behind. As long as I'm not giving it, because maybe you can get. I mean, tempo doesn't really matter too much considering there's still 3 cards down, and they're not gonna be. I mean, Dijkstra and Thaler are both dead this turn, so if they force it all the way to the end, they can maybe force out plays that would maybe work out next turn if he has the Reaver Hunters already back in the deck thanks to Neneki. So it's gonna be interesting if they read on that Neneki play and they expect it.
Yeah, because if they don't, and this is actually a situation where I wouldn't be surprised if XD Esports actually tries to just sandbag this maybe one more turn. They know that if their opponent's playing an Avalac out now that they have at least one way to reuse it, so they know they're getting at least 2 more cards this round, given them probably next turn actually. You rarely see teams leave the Avalac just on the board for any longer than 1 turn without reusing it or recycling it in some way. So they can get 2 more cards, see what they have there, and then use the Neneki, and kind of have a gotcha moment against Eskrin and Card Game Nerds here. As we see them just go ahead, they play the Cure out for value here and make a high tempo play. The nice thing here by this play is that it actually puts them ahead on board. So they go from being behind and having to play a bit of catch up against the deck that's trying to also win off an alternate win condition, to being in a position where at least when their opponent decides that they want to get out of the round, they have the answer to it. They are already ahead on the board at this point, which is a really good thing for them to maintain while also trying to figure out how not to get milled out here.
And Eskrin definitely wants to use that Shackles in this round because he knows he's not going to keep up in tempo. He knows that Petrify, if he needs to, he can slam down a lot of tempo very quickly, and it's going to be fairly hard for Eskrin with his mill deck to keep up in tempo. So he knows his only strategy now is just milling the opponent and getting card advantage that way. So that Shackles is going to be probably fairly dead in round 3 as a finisher, to get points. So he's going to probably want to use it fairly soon, I think. I'm not sure if there's any good target. I don't think it's worth using on a Reaver Hunter, to be honest. What do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree. The one other line I could see you having maybe is if you think that you can do the Reaver Hunter combo. I feel like if you're worried about that, maybe. But at this point, you have to expect it's not. You took the line of not saving your combo for it, for the Neneki potential. So at this point, I don't think he's going to expect it. What do you think of XD Esports' play of the Infantryman there instead of actually playing the Neneki out?
It's interesting because they have to see how long this round is going to go. They're kind of gambling that this long is going to go on for much longer. It's going to give them time to use, the Neneki and have save maybe the operator for next turn, for example. And they also have to maybe find a slot where they can create a tempo gap where they can play cards like Thaler. They're going to be negative tempo regardless because they're not going to be drawing cards for the most part. So if they find that tempo gap in this round, which doesn't really matter if they just use cards, they're going to want to play that Thaler and the dead cards like Dijkstra, for example, because they're not going to be able to do anything with those cards. They can't discard them, obviously. It's not discard a Northern Realm. So they have to find a gap to use those, I think, in this round.
Well, my question here is, they knew that their opponent played Avalac there. They had to expect that their opponent had a way to reuse it again if they're playing it out there, right? And they only had 1 card left in their deck, so they could have played it there and got an extra draw out of it. I wonder why they decided to do it this way, honestly. It feels like they could have maybe done it as a bit more of a punishment if they had actually used it immediately instead of the Infantrymen. So we'll see if that giving that 1 card advantage over to Card Game Nerds and Eskrin, it comes back to bite them or not. As it stands now, though, we're seeing each of the teams kind of just gearing up for this long round. They're both in it for the long haul here, as we've seen Avalac go off 6 cards so far, as it's actually doubled each player's hand, and more than doubled, I think, actually, Card Game Nerds. Interestingly enough, they have not seen the Outbreak yet, though, which generally you see much earlier in this game.
Yeah, also taking into account D-Bomb, it's going to be a very, very important card if they manage to draw it again. Just in this matchup in general against, obviously the stacked range right now and the Reaver Hunters in round 3, if Petrify does manage to pull off the combo for round 3 with Shawnee and Neneki and the Reaver Hunters again.
Yeah, as we
see a lot of dead cards as well, just a lot of dead cards. It seems like maybe it's kind of even though Petrify has cards that he's pulling out right now with Hensel, but we see the dead Dijkstra, the dead Thaler, etc. So it's gonna be very tough, I think.
What do you think of this line? Because I'm actually a little bit shocked that they went with this play here.
Yeah, I honestly have. I can imagine they're trying to maybe push Eskrin out of the round and just try and waste maybe Thaler now or cards they don't really need in round 3 and just try and do a Shawnee into Neneki into Dijkstra combo in round 3 and play 2 cards that are worth maybe 4. I think that's their just the tempo burst that they can get in round 3 to win it. But it's very committal for a round that you're not controlling because they didn't win round 1. So
I mean, at this point, they know that their opponent doesn't have any way to use Avalak anymore, but if their opponent still had Albric in their hand, if they had, say, an Asire with the Albric, they could put the Decoy back in their deck, for example. There are plays that their opponent could make them draw more than one card. Even if they had the Albric plus the Tibor right now, they could do it. So it's actually kind of dangerous here, but they might just be trying to, like you said, force this round out right here, right now from Card Game Nerds. Committing the Tibor this round is actually, I think, generally a mistake that some teams will wind up making. The Amir deck tends to actually have a fairly weak round 3. They rely on getting the extra 3-4 card advantage from their Avalak from the mill effect to actually be able to win that round 3, because in general their cards that they have put back are pretty wimpy bronze units usually. So that Tibor is a huge deal in round 3, and we'll see whether or not they decide to hold on to it here as they take the fairly light approach here of just playing the D-Shackles and the Cow. It's not going to do that much. It's going to get 10 points here. That's not that good.
Yeah, they're just trying to stay in the round. They're just, pretending that they're still fighting for this round, but really they don't have much to do here. They want to see. It's going to also give Petrify a chance to play the Thaler, because there's such a big point gap, like I was saying earlier. It's the opportunity that Petrify has to draw into that last card. It's either drawing into that card now or playing 11 points next turn. So you have to think what is worth more or less. In this case, I think playing the Thaler now is correct, to be honest.
If you hold it, you still get Neki back with the Shani, so you theoretically could do something interesting that way. So I could see them actually holding for that. You do get the draw of that plus the Dijkstra's too. It might come down to whether they expect their opponent... Like, you know your opponent has access to all their cards here, right? So you know there's still an Albric and a Tibor coming, as well as the Asire. So the Thaler might honestly just be a discard play at the very end of the game. I don't know that you need to even do anything with it.
Yeah, because the fact that Tibor comes out plus the Dijkstra, I think, would be enough to pull all the cards that Neki does pull back into the deck. So Thaler it wouldn't draw a card regardless. So it might just be 11 points for the opponent. You can just obviously discard it at the end, but it doesn't give you card advantage. It makes it so you can't really react to the last play in the game, which is sometimes very important. For example, D-Bomb. So it's a tough read for sure. You have to decide if it's worth keeping for round 3. And it'll mainly come down to if Thaler has if he's scared of Eskrin's Temple in this round and he thinks that Thaler can be a play that might put him in a tough spot in winning this round, which I don't think is going to happen because there is a 40-point gap right now, and Night Elixir are still taking for a lot of points.
So what do you think? Pass here?
The Rot Tosser's taking. There's really just such a big point gap. You don't really have much you can do to close that gap.
It is the thing. Yeah, that's going to be 8 points. That's nothing here. What do you even gain by sticking here?
And Petrify might even read this and think about going for a hero pass if he wanted. If this lasted 1 or 2 more rounds, because Tibor's dead if you pass, obviously. And
so is Albric actually. So actually, yeah, I agree with that. The hero pass there wouldn't have been a bad option, because how many points can Card Game Nerds put out? Overall, the Amir deck is a pretty tight list. He should know that he has a decent idea that there's still the Alchemist, the Foot Soldier, the Tibor, the Albric, and then the Asire is the last card. So he should know basically everything in that hand except for maybe the last Rot Tosser. So yeah, that actually would have been fine. So I do like the pass there, though. There's no reason to commit the Alchemist and the Foot Soldier that round when you can wait till this round to do it.
Yeah, I think it was the last turn they had the chance to pass without risking the hero pass. It happens a lot with decks that provide value over time as well, with Night Elix, for example, in Northern Realms and Axeman and Skellige. When you're bleeding them, you have to be careful how far you bleed them, because then you might find yourself in a position where you can't, they can hero pass and you can't catch up just due to the overtime effect. So I think that was definitely a pass.
You said that and I had a flashback to closed beta Bloody Bear and Leberkin plays. So thanks for that, I guess. As we do see the instant Shiny Naneki, which is pretty much what you'd have to expect here out of Team XD Esports. This puts Eskrin and Card Game Nerds in an awful position here, where they know that their opponent just put 3 decent cards back in their deck, and they still have to Albric and Tibor this round.
Yeah, but of course, Petrify does also have Thaler and Dijkstra, so if Albric and Tibor come out, they're obviously not going to draw, or not going to get that value, Dijkstra and Thaler. So it's going to be close, I think. 3 River Hunters is going to provide a big tempo swing, and the only real answer to them might be the D-Bomb if and the Rot Tosser.
But if Team XD Esports and Petrify decide that they want to take the safe route, they just divide up the rows there, and then I feel like Card Game Nerds is basically on the outside looking in, and every turn that they make this go longer, they're just losing more and more chances of winning this game. I think that they might have gone too far here. with how they pushed in round 2, and the fact that they gave up, basically they didn't account for whether or not their opponent would have the Neneki, and if they had accounted for that and just been a bit more careful with their swears, with their plays overall, I think they might have had a situation where they'd be able to actually counter this hand. But as it stands, this looks like a situation where XD Esports will just simply outpace them here. We're going to see very few points here out of the Amir deck in round 3, and the Hensel deck is fine. Like, even if it's giving up the Thaler and the Dijkstra here, it's going to get triple Reaver Hunter back, and that more than makes up that difference.
Yeah, I think like you predicted, the Neneki was really the shining light for Petrify in this matchup. It's the win condition, basically. It allowed him to put 6 cards back into his deck, which is obviously a lot against a mill deck. It's a lot of value. If you try and translate it to just power values, it's absolutely immense, and it's obviously, I think, game winning. I think it's the real reason he's going to win this game, probably.
Yeah, and it let them go ahead and be super aggressive there in round 2 with the Reaver Hunter, which is actually a really big deal this round. It actually let them make plays that otherwise you couldn't make in this matchup because you would be scared of those kind of situations. So we see the Rothhauser come out here. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's Eskin throwing the towel here, but using that early and not trying to wait with it with the Reaver Hunters went back in the deck kind of spells out that you know that you can't beat those, and you're just kind of going through the motions here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said earlier in round 2, the Reaver Hunters really gave Petrify flexibility to, even though he was being bled, to control when that round ended. Because there was a point in time where Eskrin could not keep on playing. He literally could not, because he didn't have the power in hand. If Petrify a hero passed, his Tibor, which is his big power tempo swing, was dead. It was an 8-point gold. So I think it was definitely the correct play. It seemed risky at the beginning, but I think Petrify read it really correctly. Pretty much the matchup, and he knew how to play it properly. We do see him playing Thaler here. I don't know if that's,
well, card game nerds knows what they have in hand, right? This is a pretty standardized list outside the Shiny Neneki combo, so they know that it's a Thaler and a Dijkstra in the hand at this point. They should be able to sit there, and with all them thinking about it and looking through the list, they know what's coming here. I do like that Petrify did not elect to draw anything here. He knows his opponent still has the Tibor. He knows he still has the Hour Brick. He knows he's getting at least 1 card off of that, so he has no incentive here to draw the card out of it. So I do like that. Pretty heads-up play. And here's a question. If you're Petrify and Team XD Esports, do you just sacrifice a Reaver Hunter here to block for this Infantryman, or do you just go ahead and play out the Operator here and just say, I'm going to slam 4 Reaver Hunters this round?
I think I'd definitely play the Operator. I think the Reaver Hunter's going to be, the 4th Reaver Hunter's going to be worth more than the 10-point Infantryman, so I think it's the correct play to make. And also you have to take into account that he doesn't need the Dijkstra at all this time, actually. He's going to probably discard it because Tibor is going to draw him his last bronze, and the Thaler was a very good play, I think, actually, looking back at it, because it enables the Operator to actually copy a unit.
So is there any out here for card game nerds? Is the Decoy and the Rothhauser ever going to be enough here? I don't think it will, at least from my looking at it. There's no line that they can take here that would give them, say, a double Rothhauser Calcarcus trigger. Anything they do here can be countered thanks to the agility on the Reaver Hunter, and we actually see Petrify decide not to play the Operator here, which is actually super interesting, and I really like, actually. He knows his opponent still has Tibor here. If they draw him a card, he doesn't actually have to play the Operator out before the end of the round, which means he gets a free extra card out of that, and it's a doozy with the Reaver Hunter.
Yeah, it's definitely the correct way to go, I think. Especially if he like you said, he knows these decks are pretty much standard now because the batches are going on for so long. So he knows what Mill list is going to have. He knows that Tibor exists. He knows, obviously, the effect that Tibor has. So I think it's a very heads-up play. I think Petrify is playing this matchup pretty well, considering I personally put him at like a 20% rate when the game started just because of the matchup. So I think he played it really, really well. And it looks like they are going to go with the win because they do have essentially 3 Reaver Hunters if that one does die. Although you can place the Operator there, and it'll boost. The Reaver Hunters will boost above 7, so they'll survive anyway, I think.
They'll boost to 7s themselves, won't they?
Oh, yeah, he only has 1.
Yeah, because he only has 1, so they'll both be 7, so you can't do that line. That Reaver Hunter is going to die no matter what. The question here basically becomes, so they each know each other's hand at this point. We're pretty sure they know it's a Dijkstra and a Reaver Hunter since the Operator gave a Reaver Hunter here, and they obviously know it's a Tibor on the opposing side. So it's basically trying to figure out who can do what here, and Petrify is trying to figure out if there's a way that he can play the Operator and get that Reaver Hunter after his opponent has passed, which I don't believe he can. Actually, no, he can't. If he plays the Dijkstra out here, he draws a Reaver Hunter out with it. His opponent plays it. No, yeah. So there's actually no way he can do this here to not have his opponent be able to play it if he does play the Operator. So it looks like he's just gonna go ahead here and play out the Reaver Hunter. And I like this line actually. He's not giving his opponent a card to play here. He will lose his Reaver Hunter here in the process, but he's gonna get another Reaver Hunter off his deck here. He can then play the Dijkstra, pull nothing. His opponent then passes, then he gets the Operator plus the Reaver Hunter, and then wins the game pretty handily from there, I think. Actually, will he win this? Hang on. He's going to lose 8 points here. That's actually a pretty large gap looking at it.
It is. 3... Yeah, considering it's only 3 Reaver Hunters and 1 does die, it's a pretty big swing.
Wait a second. Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking that this would be an easier close here for Petrify, but this actually isn't a guaranteed thing here. And I'm not good enough with counting the bond math off of all these Reaver Hunters, especially with 1 offset.
I think it's not enough.
Yeah, I think he's going to be off by like 5 points. We'll see here. I'm just going to let him go through the motions here and see whether it's enough. Because frankly, bond math makes me want to pull my hair out.
Also considering the Reaver Hunter that Operator pulls out is a 4, not a 7 or an 8. I think it's definitely not enough. I mean, it's going to be close, 18, like you said.
18 plus 6, I think, so 24. He'll be off by 5, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly 5. So we thought he had it, but that last Raw Tosser with a decoy, killing that last, it looked like a 7-point Reaver Hunter, but it's much more after you play the rest of your Reaver Hunters. It was much more value. So the fact he couldn't play around that, maybe he should have played the Operator before the Reaver Hunter. Considering the Reaver Hunters are agile, so you can dodge the decoy Raw Tosser.
Well, there was that turn where he elected to basically let that Reaver Hunter die on his ranged row, that he could have set things up maybe with the Operator, maybe with a different Reaver Hunter. There might have been plays he could do there that would have actually let it happen. But yeah, XD Esports kind of faltering there at the end, and Card Game Nerds pulls out a matchup that it looked like they weren't going to win there, but they managed to scrape it together with the Raw Tossers and a great decoy play there.
I think even if Petrify lost, I think he kind of went into this match expecting to lose because his deck was highly unfavored. So even though it's obviously tough to lose the first match in a series, I think he's not too sad. He's going to go into the next few matches pretty pumped. I think he still has the chance to win. I think he's not too disappointed with that first showing because it was really close. Losing to 5 points to Milgard, where you have a deck that essentially thins so much, is not that bad, really, I think.
Yeah, now you have that out of the way, so it's not really going to pressure the rest of your lineup either. So I think that they'll do fine here going forward. But before we do go forward, we do have a few donations to read off. Rain donates $10 and says, "I leave Team Gwentlemen, very cool guys." John Mark donates $4.20. "Hi, my name is CDPR. When I was a baby, my nanny was McBeard and she loved to shake. Now my favorite deck is Cyberpunk and I can't count the 4 Kappa Kappa Manga S." And then we have Dagon.
Dagon Del Rey with a $3 donation. "My foglets taste like Pepsi Cola. My eggs are wide like cherry pies. I got sweet taste for carryover. It's always been, so it's no surprise." What a great poem from Dagon Del Rey. Then we have,
I like that one.
Quite an interesting donation from the Real Life Couch, a $1.23 donation. Vishra, do you want to have fun reading that one?
Nope, I can't even approach it. It's a Life Coach follow-up, and I don't have the accent for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's just not in our power to read that out.
It's not in our range.
Yeah, it's above our language range.
There's many ya-ya-yas, whoosh, zoom boom. I'll do the sound effects for it.
So I guess the chat can imagine what that message looks like. Thank you, Vishra, for that.
So thank you guys very much for the donations. We really appreciate it. All of it does go directly into the prize pool. As we are going into game 2 of this set with Smoony and Card Game Nerds up 1-0, we do see Merchant here with the Brand deck. No surprise there. And Smoony is on the Radovid deck. What do we think of this matchup? As we do see, it looks like Merchant is a standard discard list and not this Queensguard list.
I think Radovid in general just lacks the power levels for this current patch right now. I think it missed out on a lot of play recently. I don't think I've seen it in ladder all the past few weeks, and it's an interesting deck to bring to a tournament, because when you bring decks to a tournament, you know what they're doing. You know what matchup you want to get with it. You know what matchups it wins against, and I guess Smoony must have a good plan and a good reason to bring Radovid. So it's gonna be interesting to see why he brought it and what his choices are in his deck, in his lineup, pretty much the deck list.
Yeah, I've played against him on this deck quite a few times on ladder, actually. And my biggest concern here is the fact that a lot of what Merchant's power here is going to be recursive threats that aren't that easy to deal with. While you can lock both the Morphurg and the Olgierd, a good player is not going to play everything into you that lets you just have an instant Radovid for the win. And I don't expect XD Esports to even remotely come close to letting them have that kind of situation. So we're going to see them play it nice and conservatively here. I don't think that we're going to see anything hasty here with their brand or their Olgierd played out, like I said. And I think that we'll see Smooney struggle to deal with that late game carryover. Whether or not he can also get his Bloody Baron big enough in this matchup is another question as well. I don't know that he's going to get more than like a 12-point, maybe a 15-point Bloody Baron here, depending on how heavily Merchant and XD Esports focus on denying that play.
Yeah, I mean, in this matchup, a normal matchup, players would play both long ships and try and get as much value out of them as possible. But obviously against Radovid, you kind of have to stagger your lockable units and play them in a way where Radovid either gets only one lock or gets two locks, but of low value. So maybe a ship that's already discarded quite a bit, it's obviously already gained a lot of value from those discards, and the lock isn't worth as much as, locking it from the start. So I think it's going to be Merchant's line of play here. Going to try and stagger those lockable units and obviously try and play around that Radovid. It's definitely the biggest threat, or the biggest visible threat right now anyway. Let's go with the Gremlins, really clear weather.
I really like that clear, actually.
Yeah, the two weather taking is always just a lot, and you don't really, it would be really odd for Smooney to have all three of these ways to spawn weather, but he does have the reinforcements, so it definitely solves that problem for him.
I'm sorry, what was that about not having all three of them? Because that looks like the third one. Yeah, I agree. That's generally a really good line, though, because once you clear that weather off, the Radovid deck can struggle to actually clear the board off. They do have things like Murderbrock, like Vernon Roach, which we do see both in Smooney's hand, but in general it requires resources that they don't want to be spending. They expect to get a lot of value from the weather procs over the course of round one, and if you can deny that early enough, then it means that their Bloody Baron is not that big of a threat later in the game like we were talking about. So going forward here, we're going to have to see how Merchant and the King Brand deck actually want to take this going forward, as their hand isn't really that well equipped to fight a long round one, especially with the way that Smooney's been playing it so far.
Well, they do have Coral, and Coral's not going to get much value in round 3, unlike other matchups, so they're probably going to want to do some kind of Udaric-Coral combo early if they want to pressure off this round and make sure they can win it, while still creating a big tempo play with Udaric, possibly getting a Raider, and then also Coral after to pretty much make it a positive point spy, essentially.
Yeah, I could see that. The other line that I could see them doing is trying to hold onto the Udaric as long as possible, so that if they could potentially get it round 3, they can deny the Bork from getting off and hitting anything on their side of the field. Now, that being said, it's actually fairly difficult to do that just because of how out of control Clandom and Pirate Captain can get. It usually will get over the 12. It gets anywhere between 14 and 17 points of value. So it's an option for them. They might instead try just to block the Thaler, which is a fairly common play, because if their opponent has Scorch then they get to stop the Scorch at least. So we'll see what they do with it. It's a very key card in this matchup that can swing things either way, and we'll see what they choose to do with it.
Also important to know that Udaric does have that 1 point advantage over the Thaler, which is normally a bad thing in most matchups because you can't really trade spies, exactly because they're not the same power level. But in this matchup, because of the Bork, it's good to have that extra point. So it's also a thing that they can play around if they go into round 2 where they both play spies, and maybe Smooney is looking to burn his own Thaler with the Bork because he's forced to play it in round 2 if he does lose his first round. So that's good for Udaric as well. It's a way to set that up properly.
Absolutely. And now one thing here that I do like, and we'll see if Merchant decides to go with this line, one thing that I found playing this matchup myself is that if you can actually get your skirmishers to a large enough point total, you can actually have them effectively soak the Bork in round 3. You basically spend your Priestess, acknowledge that it'll die, but then it does protect all of your Clandom and Pirate Captains in the 3rd round from actually getting scorched out. So we'll see whether or not he takes that line and tries to repeatedly res the skirmisher. It will require him to dig for those Priestess of Freya's, which we have seen none of at this point. But what do you think he does here for the rest of this round? I mean, I know that Smooney's contemplating here. I expect to see maybe either the Radovid or the Thunder come out here. It might be a bit early for the Vernon Roach, although it looks like he might pull the trigger here, actually. My mistake.
Yeah. I mean, the Radovid, Smooney knows that Merchant has to play that Olgierd eventually. I mean, he interprets if it's not in the graveyard, it didn't get discarded, that means he has it in hand, because why wouldn't you discard a Olgierd that goes straight to the graveyard, doesn't go to the board at all, so it can't be locked, obviously. So he knows that he has Olgierd in hand, and that's also the thing he's waiting for, maybe.
I will say I'm not a fan. He just went ahead and he shot the Morkvarg for 3 the second time around. electing not to take the free kill on the back row there and get an additional Blue Stripes commando. I'd imagine his plan here is that he wants to be able to Radovid the Morkvarg and have it die so that his opponent can't Dawn or unlock it. Now, I'm not sure I actually like that line given what each of their players' hands are. He could have just Thundered the Morkvarg and then done the Radovid anyway, or just done the Vernon Roach at that point. Still cut it off, not spent that ability there, and then still had the lock later for the Olgierd. So I'm unsure whether or not I like that line, but it is one that he's taking here to be quite aggressive against the Morkvarg.
Yeah, you have to think he doesn't have too many, like, Smooney's hand right now. He has a lot of cards that he wants to, Bork obviously he's not going to play around 1. Radovid he wants to try and find, that maximum value. So it's going to be tough for him to decide, what cards to play exactly. He just goes for the Thunder. Doesn't get max value, only 5 points, but it's enough to put him ahead. So he's going to have a tough decision next turn for sure to see what he wants to play.
Yeah, each of these players kind of have a lot of cards here like that. On Merchant's side, you really don't want to spend the Odoric yet if you can help it. It puts your opponent even further ahead and probably makes them just do a pass here, to be honest. And then if you play the Coral out now, she's not great late in the game, but at worst, she's the 5-point gold body that can't be interacted with, which sometimes can be all that you need to win the round. So we'll see whether or not he actually gets a pass from Smooney here, or Smooney continues to pressure this round out, as it looks like he's hovering that dollar and thinking about it at the very least. And he does elect to go for it, and we'll see what his choice is here. He might be wanting to play this out just so he can deal with that Morkvarg. If he gets rid of Morkvarg or the Olgierd here, if he can force the Olgierd to be played out, it's actually pretty crucial for later if he can get the Radovid off. So we'll see just how deep he wants to take this to actually look for the Radovid.
I think it's not only the fact that he wants to lock the Morkvarg and the Olgierd, but the fact that he knows he cannot lose this round. If he allows Merchant to control round 2 and to bleed out that Bork, he knows he does not have really... The only win condition is the Bloody Baron, which isn't going to be as big as other matchups, for example, Monsters. It's going to be big, but just not as much, not as game-winning as in other matchups. And obviously, Merchant's going to have, captains, skirmisher reses, Zera's possibly coming out, etc. So he knows he has to take control of this round. He needed the Thaler to do that, to just stay into this round for a bit longer.
And in the current situation, since the Olgierd hasn't been played, there's not that threat from the Ceres immediately and that 13-point carryover that we so famously see from this deck. But he's still in a situation where there would be some amount of carryover, so he'd be forced to play out at minimum 1 card, potentially even more. And if he goes into round 2 having to do that, he won't be able to have the resources for round 3. So we see him trying to figure out what to do here. I'm curious of whether or not this is enough to actually make him pop the Radovid. I don't think it will be. I think we'll just see him thunder down that captain. But I'm a little bit torn here about what he's going to do the turn after that. It's kind of a game of chicken here between both of these players on when they can pop their remaining cards here. You have to imagine Merchant's not going to play that Olgierd this round if Radovid's still up.
Yeah, it's a gambling game for sure. They both have cards they don't want to use, and they're waiting to see who can wait out the longest. So the Bork does go down. That's very aggressive.
Instant pass?
I think it should be from Merchant, yeah. He knows he's dealt with that already, which is one of the biggest threats that the Smooney has for round 3. So unless Smooney's running Renew, but that's probably not happening. So it's going to be tough for sure to see what Merchant does here. You give up control of round 2, but you also get the card advantage.
You get the immediate 1 card off your opponent, plus then they have to do the dry pass round 2. If he doesn't play the Radovid and lock the Morkvarg here, then it's he gains the card back in round 2 automatically. So Smooney's almost locked into the Radovid here if you pass, and getting rid of the Radovid now means that you get the Olgierd next round, and if you wanted to, you could technically Sigdrify against the Morkvarg, although you probably wouldn't be inclined to do so. But yeah, I like this pass. Smooney's almost guaranteed to have to play the Radovid here. Really?
He goes to the Thunder instead.
That has to be the wrong line, right? Because now he can't dry pass next round. How is he going to win? Like, he's giving his opponent the card back here, right? If he tries to dry pass.
Yeah, it's definitely questionable.
Go for a 2-0?
Maybe he just thought Radovid was too much value and he could find more value in round 2, but it's definitely, I don't think it's going to be enough to force the card advantage, because obviously Merchant's going to have much higher tempo swings with pretty much all his plays, unless he doesn't really draw the high tempo plays, but I think it was definitely a questionable decision not playing the Radovid there, because it obviously, like you said, it allows for Merchant to evade that dry pass that was threatening him.
Yeah, and we're going to see Smooney almost immediately play out the Sarah here, pitching the Bloody Baron and get the Seer out of his deck. Wonderful little interaction if you have your other 2 golds out of your deck here, that you get to guarantee that 4th gold, since Bloody Baron's guaranteed to go to your hand. And we will see him recoup at least that part of that 1-card advantage that he's down to win round 1. My biggest concern here, though, is how is he actually going to win round 3? He's going to have a 12-point Baron currently. He has Radovid here that can pop off 2 things and make it a 14, but Merchant still has a lot of tools here. He still has a Sigdrifa, he still has a Priestess, and he can wait for that Olgierd until after the Radovid comes out. He has no issue waiting here, because if that Radovid doesn't come out, then, you know, wow, he's going to go for it. And we're going to see the Ansoon Radovid here, I think, and then the Donner unlock with the Olgierd, so it's not going to be quite as bad, but he will wind up losing one of his Resurrection targets around 3 with that Morkvarg getting killed.
Yeah, Siri does really the same thing as a dry pass, so Smooney does have that to fall back on to regain that card advantage. But like you said, there just isn't really a round 3. The Bloody Baron isn't big enough to answer, you know, with Pirate Captains and the Frey and the possible Saras coming in as well. So I think the Bork was maybe too premature round 1. It felt very rushed, and I think he gave up the game there pretty much.
We're going to see right now he has a maximum of 21 points in his hand, assuming he keeps everything here. So on Smooney's side, whereas on Merchant's side, he actually needs a Resurrection effect here if he wants to get a Saras back in round 3. It looks like he didn't get it, but you have to imagine he has to keep the Pirate Captain here. There's not much more you can ask for than a 14-point card at this point, instead of trying to risk looking for that last Priestess. Yeah, it looks like he'll decide to keep it. And we actually see Smooney electing to pitch back the Siri, and he winds up with the last rate, which is actually potentially going to be worse than that Siri this round. We'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, I was going to see if Merchant plays around that with the row stacking, which you probably should. He's going to be playing around just any row effect like last rate anyway, or you should be anyway. So I think last rate's not going to get much value. It's also a series of 5-point gold body. It seems like little, but at least it's not interactable. But even then, I think it's just not enough. Like he's nowhere near the power levels.
As we see, Merchant just no fear slams the 14 right away. Now he is in a bit of a slightly awkward situation where both the Skirmisher and the Pirate Captain are 15s, and he doesn't have a way to actually buff that right now. He's looking through his graveyard to see what he can do, but his best play here is raising the Gremist and popping the Priestess off. But he's actually gonna have to just slam out the pair of 14s and hope that the Scorch potential from his opponent isn't enough for it. Looking at each player's hand, we know that it's enough here. We know that Smooney's just dead to rights here. But Merchant has to think through this, think if there's any combination of 2 cards with Scorch that can actually wind up beating his play here, since Smooney is guaranteed to have the very last play of the game.
You can also res the Donar to get the Pirate Captain up to a 15, and in that way staggering the Scorch from hitting both units. And it's obviously less points than Gremist, but not by too much. So maybe he does elect to do that. Yeah, it looks like he will. So it's also a play that's very important against Scorch matchups. Locking your own units, or locking even a Pirate Captain to stagger them is a very heads-up play that can really save you games if you are expecting a Scorch.
But it doesn't actually. He had a spell there that won't offset them at all. Since the Pirate Captain requires that a unit gets discarded. Yeah, so he gets punished. He would get punished if there was a Scorch here. If there was a Scorch, this game would be over. But luckily for him, Smooney is not sitting on it.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk you take when you play Donar. He is the king of RNG, so it's always a bit of a gamble using him for good and for bad. And here it was for bad for Merchant, but luckily Smooney has the wrong spell in his hand, and it's not a Scorch, it's just last rate. So Merchant does end up winning this game. Like I said, I think Radovid fell off a bit. It just doesn't have the power levels to compete unless you can control round 1, and like you said, it relies a lot on Weather to do that. I think Weather is like a crutch for Radovid almost, where it really leans heavily to get value in round 1 because they don't have the bronze cards to really gain that huge value like other decks can, and those combo plays that can really give them a lot of points.
Yeah, and we see that situation where Bloody Bear, when it's not getting those 30-point plays against Dagon, it just kind of feels lackluster. This is actually just like a vanilla Gerald here. Like there's nothing special about this card, and we see once again when you get bled out of that Villain Trattenmirth in round 2, you don't have the Scorch in round 3, you just can't deal with the board. So that's backwards. I apologize. This actually should be a 1-1 here, if I'm not mistaken here, not an 0-2.
Yep, it should be 1-1.
So we will go to the next match. This is now a tied series as we have the brand taken out for XD Esports, and we have Card Game Nerds without their Amir deck anymore. We do have another donation here from True Delta 65 with $5 who say, it's Petrify should have played Armor, what a scrub Kappa. Can't argue with that after seeing the the very strong showing from the Commandos in our first match of the day. As we go directly into Game 3 here, it will be Trudon on an Ithne deck against Agloza here. What do you think of this Ithne deck, taking a look at it right away?
Ithne decks are always interesting because it depends a lot on the matchup you get. If you get a matchup you can really punish with Scorch, and it's always like, it's almost like Rada because they need to control that round one. These Scorch decks that run so many removal cards that really need the right situation to really shine rely so much on winning round one. You need that Bork for round 3, and like you said, you can play around it with Spies as well. So I think the big interaction will be how the Spies are played and if they can counter Scorches, etc.
Yeah, and we are seeing the less popular two builds off the Ithne one, as we are seeing people here in week 3 of TGI kind of branch away from the standardized ladder decks. This one is a bit more board control-y than the one that Pumpkin has actually popularized with the Hawker, with the archers, with the Hawker supports, with the brand. He actually is playing much more board removal, and instead of relying on those multiple Scorch effects, he does have ways to ping and pop his way across the board and catch up that way. So we'll see whether or not that's enough to take out the brand deck. I have to imagine, though, that without having those Scorch effects, it's going to be really difficult to actually contend with the brand deck's just round 3 power output.
Yeah, definitely. I think the archers are interesting because they allow the player to make situations where they can Scorch multiple units, which I think is one of the biggest upsides they have, and also the fact they're 5-point units and not 6-point units, which can get awkward with Scorch if you're playing a deck that has a lot of 6-point units with the trappers and dragoons, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will see whether or not he can hold one of those resources for round 3. Bran is also a potential, just a win con in and of herself in round 3. She can be capable of obscenely high board swings, and she can get up to a 14, a 15, something like that. She'll just completely counter a captain. So we'll see whether or not Trudon is able to do that. He is just going to lead with the archer here, trying to ping off that longship before it can do too much damage.
The brand does also mess up with the Scorch effects, though, because you do get a very high value unit. So it's interesting to see how they're going to play around that and how they decide to play the brand in what round to really be able to get it max potential without having to interfere with the Scorch or the Bork, for example.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the reasons why I'm not a personal fan of this deck. I don't like it when you play decks like that just kind of fight with themselves. You are playing Shiru, you're playing Scorch, you're playing Villain Trettenmirth, and you're playing this unit that you generally want to have as big as possible. So it creates this weird dichotomy, and we'll see whether or not they're able to handle it here. As Gloza just kind of hovers that second longship, you have to imagine he's going to slam it here. There's no reason not to. You have to expect the other longship's going to get killed off either with a trapper or another archer this round, so you might as well set up the other longship while you're at it. If he doesn't have it right away, then you're fine. If he does have it, if it's a trapper here, you're fine, right? You still get to get both of them off this turn before the other one dies. If it's an archer, you're basically right where you started anyway, so we'll see what the Merc hits here.
Yeah, it's always interesting. Like, you have to be scared to play 2 ships if they're both at 6 because you can get Scorched, and that can possibly be a very high value Scorch because you obviously take away so much value from the discard ship triggers. But because one's at 2 and one's at 6, there isn't really that threat. So I think it was definitely proper to play both longship and just set up a very long round, one where they can control the board with the ship triggers.
And that's actually an awful hit here for Trudon. He finds the support out of his deck instead of the removal spell that he wanted. So that means that those 2 longships are going to stick around for 1 turn longer. And we'll see Gloza go ahead, use the Brain here. I have to expect at this point that if he uses the Brain, it'll be for Saris and a double Raider, since he has both the Olgierd and the Morgvarg in his hand. He'll just take the very high power play. It's going to be a huge tempo swing here thanks to the double longship on the board.
He might do a skirmisher as well if he is, because he's already very far ahead with the double ships and the brand triggering. Maybe he does go for a skirmisher, although playing a skirmisher into a Scorch deck, maybe not the best idea. We'll see what he did. Maybe he's not playing a skirmisher altogether.
If I was him, I'd tend to go just for the more tempo play. You'd want to lock round 1 up here, in my opinion. You know that your opponent's definitely going to be playing some form of a Bork deck here. You know it's a pretty popular thing here. And to me, I think he is going to go for it. You just want to make sure this round 1 is secured here. At 20 points, it's very difficult for Trudon to come back from this situation. So if you can secure this right now, you can then go for the bleed strategy in round 2 if you want to.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe he's not even playing Skirmisher. There are some variants of Kingbrand that do not play Skirmisher and choose to put in a tech card instead. So that's definitely an option as well. Let's just see what Trudon's going to decide to play here because it's a very big tempo gap. Obviously, he won the coin flip, so he has 2 cards to play to pass, but he might just go for the pass here. And
yeah, when you see it.
Similar to Spoony, I mean, giving up round 1 as a control deck is a very tough decision to make because you give up all that control and the chance to get the perfect situation with your Shiru and your Bork and just all your Scorch spells.
Yeah, and missing that hit off the Elven Merc rally effect was just absolutely devastating here. As we see him actually draw into a first light here, which is something he didn't want to see here, actually. He's pretty much forced to mulligan it, otherwise he has a dead Merc in hand, and then he hits one of his bronze units.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely tough. At least, I mean, the good part is that Glota does not have any carryover yet because he does have all the silvers that produce carryover in hand. So at the very least, it's something that Trudon can think maybe he just is not. He's going to play him this turn, obviously, because he's going to get that carryover for round 3 at least. But that is with one upside.
Yeah, and we'll see how Agloza decides to play out this round. He does need to be a little bit careful here since he does have Olgierd and Morkvarg both in hand, and that those conveniently line up for a Scorch if he isn't careful and plays something out beforehand. One nice thing about this matchup from the side of the Skellige player is that Udalryk, which we see played right here, will line up exactly with Yavin so that it basically cancels out that Scorch effect. Whether or not we see anything from Trudon to actually offset that is a different case entirely, but this is a nice little side effect of having the only other spy that matches up perfectly with Yavin.
Although both players have options to unmatch those 2 strength units because they have Lugos can always discard a Raider or a Freya even, depending on how the Ceres process is looking for round 3 to get that damage down on his own units, because Lugos can target both enemy units and your own units, so it's definitely a flexible card that you can use in that regard as well. But of course, Trudon can also find the archers that can do the same thing. Oh wait, archers can only target enemy units, so
yep, only enemy.
He does not have the flexibility. Glota is really the one that can decide which of the 2 units gets scorched if Bork is played, but obviously Trudon does not have Bork in hand for this round, so unless he draws it with Yavin, probably not going to look into that opportunity.
You know, one play I actually have seen before in this particular matchup because of that exactly is that people have actually used the Hawker support to buff the Yavin in days past, which just so you can have that offset to it. And it's actually not as bad as it sounds because you expect the Gwentlemen Pirate Captain to be around a 15 at the end of the game. So if you hold it till the end of the game, then you can get it in that round 3. You can actually set it up with the Gwentlemen Pirate Captains. So it's not the worst line here, as we do see him go ahead and with the Ermion, he's going to discard the Morkvarg, get that extra proc when his Ceres, and also offset from the Olgierd in his hand, which is also a very good thing to be doing, just in case that Udalryk does happen to die. And
we saw he does have the skirmish, so he's going to have the possibility to res that. And like you said, it could be kind of a meat shield for a Scorch in later rounds, which obviously is a high value Scorch, but it also gives the next resurrection even more value, so it's not as bad as it might look initially.
One thing I'll be interested to see here is how Agloza and Card Game Nerds use their Donor. Using the Donor in this matchup is really interesting for 2 reasons. One, you can use it, primarily the only really good lock target here is a Trapper when it's played, but you can play it out before then and you can kind of interrupt a Merc Chain. This deck is actually super tight with the way that its bronze spells and its units interact with each other. You got one within in an almost perfect manner, and if that gets interrupted by something like a Donor, even with poor draws, you can actually wind up kind of bricking both your hand and your deck, unfortunately. So I'll be really interested to see when they pop the trigger on it and when they actually go, not for the lock effect, but for that discard effect, I think, is something that could be really pivotal to how this game turns out.
Yeah, Trudon does force the Ceres to come out this round, which Agloza doesn't care about too much, I think, because he has control over the round, so he can really decide how many resurrections he has in hand and how many he keeps for round 3 to guarantee the Ceres comes out again. Although if he is scared of the Bork, he is going to have to go pretty far into this round, so it might be a problem in the end if he does decide to try and bleed out that Bork, which obviously Trudon does not have anyway, but he doesn't know that, so it might be a point where you have to decide, do you want Ceres out round 3 or do you want to bleed out the Bork?
Well, right now he has access to, I believe, 6 total resurrections in round 3, so he has plenty. He has the Lugos, the Morkvarg, the Olgierd, and then the 3 resurrection units in his hand. So he has plenty of ways to resurrect units right now. The main question is how does he get out of this round with the best resources possible for round 3. And I actually wouldn't mind seeing a Priestess of Frey here. He can afford to use it here. He can afford to then make that Skirmisher into a 14 for round 3, which is actually going to be a really nice offset if he can then also get more discard to make that Captain maybe a 15. Right now he has 2 discard units to make that a 15, which is what we want. We want at least a 15, preferably maybe even a 16, so that the archers have a little bit more of an issue offsetting them here. But I think it's probably his best tempo play here as well as a way to catch up. So we'll see whether or not he does that, or he might even commit a Gwentlemen Pirate Captain here. Generally, holding on to them for round 3 is a mistake. If you keep all of them, they just become one very easy Scorch target. So offsetting them between different rounds can be a great strategy for this deck.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you do run 3 captains, which I think a lot of SK discard players started running instead of the 3 Freyas, it's very important against Scorch heavy decks to try and stagger those between each round and draw out a Scorch, or at least, serve as fairly high tempo, even if it's only maybe 10 or 11 points round 1 or 12 and 13 round 2. It's still very important, like you said, to offset them, because if not, you just have, that triple Scorch in round 3 that just loses you the game outright.
Yeah, and with Gremist, with Skirmishers, Reses, you have decent sized bodies in round 3. Otherwise, you don't need to hold on to that thing. It's not like a matchup, say, against monsters, where you need those multiple bodies of 14, 15 points that then can be stacked against you. You need to make sure that you can't get multiple 2-for-1s. And Gwentlemen Pirate Captain is the easiest way to have a 2-for-1 happen against you, so I want to see him be aggressive with it. Even though he has 6 cards left in his deck, he's not guaranteed to hit another one. He has enough cards in hand that he can make up for it. He doesn't need that card in round 3, and right now it gives him a pretty easy way to pull ahead of his opponent here. And then with the fog effect, it kind of puts him in a situation where his opponent has to decide what they want to do to actually stay in this round, or if they want the resources for round 3 at this point.
And we just see a fog from, like you said, from Gravez, which indicates that Gloza wants to go for a long round 2. It tells Trudon that, he's going to be in this for the long haul, and obviously trading off 13 burst points with Gravez if you have a Frey on board to, going for that damage over time with the fog definitely reads that Gloza wants to go for a long round 2 and wants to try and bleed out that Bork that he thinks Trudon does have in hand.
That Iglesias is actually super interesting to me that he went ahead and he basically recognized that play, like you just said, that Gloza and Kargay Nerds want to make this a very long round, and he's kind of now forcing Gloza to reconsider that plan, because eventually, as we see Trudon hovering over here, that will get down to Morgfreg. That old Beard will die eventually, Morgfreg will be open, and then if Morgfreg dies, that's a free resurrection ability that's gone for round 3. So it might give Gloza a little bit of pause here about whether or not he wants to keep going, but it looks like he's just going to take this opportunity to slam the 12-point Pirate Captain here and say, your move.
I think Trudon also knows that he has the... I think the fog was correct, because like you said, he read into that play. He knows it's going for a long round, so he just commits to that and says, I'm going for a long round 2. Like, what are you going to do about it? How can you answer to this fog? And because obviously if you use Gravez, you don't have any more clears. This deck does not run, first flights, doesn't run any kind of clear other than the Gravez. So unless he just have to wait for a new round to get that Gravez out again with Sigdrifa. So it's a fog that's going to last the rest of this round for sure.
You do see a little bit of an awkward deck situation right now for Trudon as he is trying to navigate what to do with the rest of this round. Gets a great hit here with the Trapper. He can go ahead and try to clear out that Morgfreg here. But looking at his deck, he has a bunch of cards here that, while they're okay, they're going to be a little bit situational here, right? His Merc can only hit a Dimeridium Shackles now. He has no guarantee for his Villain Trettenmirth round 3. He can't Yaven yet because he could have the potential to hit Saskia, which is just a bad card, and then Shackles is also bad. Like, what do you do if you hit that? You literally can't afford to Yaven yet. So he's kind of being dictated what cards he has to play now. He has a very rapidly dwindling pool of cards he can play before he has to play out things like his Ithne, like his Yaven, like the Merc, before he can get access to the cards he truly wants, like his Villain Trettenmirth, or the Murderbrock and Double Thunder Trapper that he's hovering in deck right now.
I mentioned the best use for the Shackles would be on the Old Geared, but Gloza does have the Donor anyway to counter, so it's not going to do much for Trudon, but I can't really see a better use of that Shackles, really. I'm not a big fan of the card, honestly, Shackles. I think it's very situational, and in this matchup specifically, there's really not any gold you want to lock.
Yeah, I think in general we'd see it be used more in line to lock off the Old Geared here, as we do see Donner actually doing something really relevant here, actually. Instead of pulling the Shackles, it pulls the Doublethon Trapper here. What it does do is it opens up Trudon to having the ability to now, if he wanted to, he could Ithne out the Alzur's Double Cross, pull in the Murderbrock, and he has the potential to actually make off levels here with the Yaven. So it does open up to a different line of play here if he so chooses to do so. I don't think we'll see him take that line, but it does mean that the Murderbrock is now open if he needed it later in their game, which is a line that could actually happen, honestly. Murderbrock is a really powerful card here because it can actually make those Power Captains go on the same level as Yaven if they're not careful. Or even like the Skirmisher, if he reses the Skirmisher and makes it a 14.
Yeah, especially with a Scorch in hand. It's pretty much like, do you want 2 Scorches in hand with Ithne as well, or 2 Scorches used in round 3? Or do you want to just level it out and get those points from the Murderbrocky, from the body of the Murderbrocky, and you still have essentially double Scorch because you're Scorching 2 units. It's just kind of a different line of play, but it gives you more points because you get that Murderbrocky body pretty much.
Yeah, if I'm Trudon, I'm kind of in a torn spot right now. I want to hold on to my Ithne for the Scorch value in round 3, but I'm scared to death that I basically get a blank card in my draw, like the Dimeradium Shackles. Maybe even I guess not the Nature's Gift. I guess only dead draw you can have that is Dimeradium Shackles and maybe Murderbrock. But if you draw the Shackles, you're forced to then mulligan it, and then if you hit the Saskia, you're just kind of there in a, well, what the hell do I do now situation. So we'll see if he elects to actually spend the Ithne here. It looks like instead he's going to go for the play that just barely keeps him ahead with the Archer. I don't mind that play at all. He can go ahead, clear off that Morkvarg and make sure it won't come back next round. But he's kind of looking at that skirmisher and thinking, what do I do about that next round? It's going to be a bit of a problem if his opponent has multiple other large units to go ahead with.
Yeah, I think the Shackles was definitely just looking for a matchup like maybe a Nilfgaard with Tibor, for example, or even a control mirror. But I think this might even be the worst possible matchup for Shackles because there isn't really a gold unit, which is the ideal, obviously, in a Scorch control deck. You want to hit the Shackle on a big gold unit like Siri Dash or Tibor and be able to Shackle that. And this matchup, the best you're going to get is a lock on a Morkvarg or a Longship, and even then it's just such a low tempo play. I don't think it's worth it. So.
You know, when do we think that Agozo decides to bow out of this round? Because he has the potential right now with the way that this is lining up, thanks to Coral in that range throw. It's going to get off, what, 6, 9, 13, 16. It's going to be a 21-point Coral. So the Coral itself actually can make a fairly large dent in this board state. Lugos can still discard a Raider, res that back. Sigdrift and Priestess both actually have targets in the graveyard. So does he push this round, do you think? Does he try to make a Trudon and XD Esports have no resources for round 3?
I think he does. Coral's useless round 3. She really is not going to get much value because he's going to expect gold bodies, so it's not going to do much. And he doesn't know Trudon does not have Bork in hand. And if you think your opponent has Bork in hand, if it's a control deck that, you know, pretty much all lists run the same golds, and Bork is obviously one of them in a control deck, you know you have to bleed down to the opponent has to have, you know, a set amount of cards in hand to guarantee he can't use that Bork in round 3. So I think he's going to bleed to that amount, just bleed a few more cards, make sure the Bork can't possibly be used in round 3 because there just isn't enough turns for the Bork trigger to go off. And I think that's going to be pretty much the point he's going to go to. He might sacrifice the Ceres coming out in round 3 because of that. But I think it's going to be the option he's going to go with, unless he sees a very big point gap and he knows that Trudon has to use the Bork anyway in this round. Yeah,
if I'm in Glows, I'm getting this down deep enough where Bork doesn't matter in round 3, if I can help it. We see Trudon here potentially hovering the Bran as he's decided between that and Yavin, but this Yavin is so risky. If it hits the wrong thing here, you are just done. Relying on Fate to pick him 2 good cards out of the deck. Oh, and he gets the Bork. That's big. If he had missed there, if that had been either of the other 2 units, that would have been an awful Yavin if it had been either Murderbrock or Saskia. But luck smiles on him. He gets the Bork, and now we'll see whether or not Agloza decides to truly push for this round. Trudon still does have the option where he can commit the Bork, the Scorch, the Ithne, and then still have a Brand for the 3rd round. But that's committing a lot of resources here. He's actually in a situation that's not great for him, and Agloza can make him basically push to the very brink of whether or not he can actually win this game or not.
Yeah, I think this would be a proper pass. You get the card advantage, you almost kind of force out the Bork, or at least very big resources, because there is a very big point gap. And it's only 1 card difference, so he's going to have to go, Trudon's going to have to go at least 2 cards in, and obviously they're going to be very big cards, because for a deck that thins and controls very well, you know, the last few cards are going to have are not going to be, you know, Elven Mercs or Travelers. It's going to be...
He gets this in 2 cards, I think, with the Ithne ADC for the Murderbrock to make the Captain down to an 8. And then he can switch with that in the Yavin next turn. Is that enough? Or am I off? My math might be off here. That's 20 points. 25.
Regardless, he's still a card down, so it's not an ideal situation either.
And then you're also in the situation where you have the Bork for round 3, you're going to get the Bork to proc, but Bran is going to kill something off here, and then you have 1 other card at best. So, like, at that point, it's like your opponent can just play around it, let that proc, and then, well, you're killing your own Bran at that point. So we see that he elects to actually commit that card this round, and it looks like the Scorch as well. And I actually like this line a lot. The other line that I said would have thinned his deck by the Murderbrock. This way he is going to keep a decent amount of gold bodies for round 3 that are basically uninteractable. We'll see whether or not this is enough to actually secure him round 3 or not, though, as we need to see what his draw is here. He has both very good and very bad options here. Honestly, looking at his deck, what do you want here? Maybe the Nature's Gift, the Scorch, and the Murderbrock?
Yeah, you definitely don't want the Shackles, that's for sure. Yeah, I think the Bran play was correct in round 2 because it's a very high value body that can get borked. So it might, like I said earlier in the game, it might, you know, mess up your own Scorch, your own Bork. So I think it was definitely correct to try and get rid of that in round 2 as soon as possible, even though it's a big, you know, a big play that you have to get rid of.
So it looks like Trudon's just staring at a hand that basically reads, I'm going to blow up your 3 biggest cards here, and we'll see whether that's enough here. Agloza does have the Lugos in hand. He did draw a Pirate Captain there, so he can, thanks to the extra card he got last round, wait until the very last play of the game and then play that after every Scorch has been played out. We'll see whether or not he wants to do that, though. He could... is there an interesting line here that he can make with the Skirmisher? I don't think that there is. Unless he wants to maybe play the Skirmisher and then shoot it with his own Lugos to offset them.
Like we said earlier, he can do the Donar trick once again to offset, but of course he'd only be pulling Shackles. So again, it would not stagger them at all. So he would be forced to use Lugos, but he can just play the Captain last, I believe, and well, it'll get scorched. Bork would scorch one of them, and he could play around that way.
Yeah, he effectively has 2 more Scorches here because he has the Ithne and the Nature's Gift. The Nature's Gift just fetches him Scorch, obviously, and then he Ithnes the Scorch back. So the first 2 things that Agloza plays will die, which in this case will be the Skirmisher here. He can then Sig Driftfade if he wants, and then he can play the Lugos out, which means that he'll end the game. I think that Agloza still might win this just on the merit of how few points Trudon has.
Yeah, it's only 20 points.
Yeah, it's not that hard of a thing to counter, and just Lugos plus the Captain do it. So it looks like Agloza should be able to do this. Ooh, wait a minute.
Goes for the Middenbrockie.
This is actually a super interesting play here.
It's worth 12 points. I mean, it gives you more points on the board, but it also gives Lugos a target.
It does. That is accurate. However, it does also mean, though, that he's guaranteed to get 1 Scorch off here, and... is that enough? I don't think it's enough to actually close it, but I didn't actually read that line. The Lugos here might just solve it simply because it goes ahead and not only clears this, but then puts even more points on the board that then also won't be scorched. We're going to see a situation here, I think, where Trudon having to go down that extra card there to win the last round is going to come back and bite him, because if he had been able to actually do this 1 turn later and have the board go off after Agloza plays his last card, he'd be able to clear off that Pirate Captain here, and that would actually win him the game. And in actuality, we're going to see him lose because of that, I think. He just can't deal with that last Pirate Captain.
Yeah, if you look at it now, it's essentially trading whatever Sig Driftfade brings out for the Bork Scorch, and then you have the Pirate Captain after, so it's still a big point swing for Agloza, and he still wins it by quite a bit, I think, just because of that extra card advantage. He does know the Skirmish is a 17 and not a 15, so it's correct to play the Pirate first, because it's obviously scorching for less points, 2 points less. I mean, regardless, it's still not even close. I mean,
yeah, it's more than enough here to win this. And again, we go back to that round 1, and I have to just think of that one play where he had the Elven Merc rally out a Hawker support instead of actually any kind of removal. His other 2 options there were a Trapper or an Archer, and if he had hit either of those for that first boat, it would have saved him a bunch of points in round 1. So
we didn't even factor in the Ceres, which is 7 more points as well. So he wins it handily by 19 points. So definitely more than enough. Like we both said, I think
another time.
Yeah, I think even the card advantage wouldn't have given him the option. He still wouldn't have won. I think the fact that the round 1 was closed out so early and Agloza had full control of round 2 is really what gives those decks that they're generally weak against Scorch because they have so many Scorchable units, but if they have control of situations, they can really force out the Bork and create plays that are not anywhere near optimal for a control deck, like we saw in round 2, for example.
Yeah, and this is something that Bran has done time and time again on the ladder in the current meta, and part of what can make SK struggle at times, or what can make this Goetel deck struggle at times, is just the fact that you can make so many endgame threats with that deck, and you can put them at so many different strength levels, that even though the fact of the matter is that Trudon had 3 Scorches if he wanted them, it still wasn't enough to even come close to beating the points that they could put out that round, which just kind of shows the power of when you have those reses and giant units like Gwentlemen Pirate Captain. It just can be too much for even the full-on control decks to beat.
I think the main difference between, for example, these Goetel control decks and decks from Closed Beta, which I'm sure many of us remember, is that the round 1 is so much weaker now. There isn't any hybrid control deck that can really outpower the big power decks in round 1. You can't... it's the same problem with Radivate. They just don't have the cards to really beat King Bran round 1 or beat Monsters round 1, for example. I think that's the biggest issue. They have a very good round 3 control, but they don't have enough power to, or they can't commit enough to round 1 without faltering their round 3 play.
Well, here we will see whether or not Trudon can carry on. We do know that Smoody has to be the one to close out this out for the card game nerds with his Radovid deck, and we'll see whether or not Ithne can take this back. Interesting opening hand here. We do see a few cards here from Trudon that have been changed up for this matchup. They know specifically that Smoody is on the Radovid and he's stuck here. So even though he can change things within his leader, he can't change the leader itself out. So we know he's pretty much stuck to a control deck. So we see Trudon with a bit of a cheeky counter here, going with the Traps build, as we do see both Sappers, and I believe Morin and to reveal, or is it just to reveal? I think it's just to reveal, actually.
Which is risky because, Sappers it's not as risky. But it's a very interesting thing, being versatile enough to be able to switch your deck lists between in a tournament match when you read or you see your opponent's deck list and you have the chance, like you know what they're going to be playing, so you have the chance to switch your deck list. I think it's also a very important skill that kind of open deck lists allow in this tournament format. It allows for a player not only to bring a fixed deck list that they've been thinking about, for days or for weeks, but also to change it on the fly as a team and be able to adapt to certain situations is also really cool, I think.
Yeah, and we see Smoody did the exact same thing over on the card game nerd side as he put in vanilla Geralt in this deck. Great option here if he thinks that Trudon's stuck to a control list here, as it's just a gigantic goal unit for the third round. So we'll see whether or not these two tech options that these two teams made this round wind up winning or losing the game. As we see a pretty easy lead here off of Redanian Knight. I'm not sure I like keeping that in. If you're going to change this deck up, it's a dwarf, it's a square tail deck, that they really don't run any weathers unless you're expecting maybe to play like a Skellige Storm, I guess. I think he could have maybe switched that up and picked a different bronze unit to fill in that gap here.
Yeah, I think Redanian Knights get some value, but of course they're weak to Scorch, for example. And they're weak to Thunder. So it's kind of playing into the even if you think they're going to switch to Dwarves, for example, or whatever, it's still not, I think, an ideal bronze unit. They could have maybe brought something that synergized better with the deck they're playing against.
Yeah, you have to imagine this is a Thunder right here, right? Leaving Dragoons to tick deeper into round is incredibly dangerous for this deck, so we can just see the Soleil potentially used with the Thunder here just to dig one card deeper into the deck. His other option here would be to drop one of the Aretuza Adepts and put a Weather in the back row, but then that gives that card 3 turns of proccing and gives +3 in the hand, and I really don't think that you want to do that with this deck. He doesn't know that there's Sappers in hand and there's potential Bamboozling coming his way, but it's still one of those things you just don't want to let those points sit in hand. We saw in closed beta what happens when that is allowed to happen, and it is not pretty.
Yeah, I think Dragoons are similar to Longships, where Thunder is a very good way to deal with them, and they're both cards that gain a lot of value over time. They're the basic, 6 strength bronze unit at the start, but if you let that grow or let that be used with discard, for example, with the Longships, it gets a lot of value over time. And Weather isn't always the best solution because it takes a while to actually kill them, and it can be played around as well. So.
Yeah, and Smoody does not have a great hand here. His Soleil drew him into a Bronze Frost, so not very much going on there. As we see on Trudon's side, he does have multiple cards here. He can choose to clear the weather here if he wants to with the Elven Mercenary he has. He has 2 Hawker supports to continue buffing that Sapper in his hand. And this will be a really rude awakening for Smoody if he tries to lock that, as it'll just flip it back over. It'll do the damage, but then if that's a buffed Sapper, it's still a huge amount of points on the board and is effectively countering Radovid at that point.
Yep, exactly. And like we said earlier in the other game, I think Smoody had a really good round 1 in hand, and he was able to pull out all 3 weathers perfectly without any hiccups like having a Frost in hand. But in this case, we see a bit of a worse round 1 hand, and that might come back to bite him if he can't. I mean, they're both control decks, really, so maybe it's not as important who wins round 1 because both decks want to have, well, I guess it does kind of matter because they can pretty much put the terms on what round 3 ends at. So it's always important as a control deck to have the control of round 2, I think.
And look at the removal options he has. He has 3 soft removals and 3 different weather effects, which aren't really going to get much here. We know it's Squaretel, we know that they can clear weather, so it's really difficult to actually stack multiple weather effects against them, along with the fact that a lot of their deck is agile. In addition to that, all we really have here in his hand is a Stoneford Tremor, which doesn't get much value here. Most of the units in this deck are going to be around 6 points, or just dodging to complete with the Sapper. And Radovid itself, not that great here. So Smoody's kind of between a rock and a hard place already here, and he has to figure out how to actually either win this round or be able to bow out gracefully here, get an extra card or 2 out of his opponent in exchange for that round win.
And the Dragon can definitely bamboozle quite a bit. It's going to be tough to see how Smoonie reacts to when that does go down, because it's always hard when the card's face down. You have to always, you can't just say, oh, it's Teruvial and it's going to flip for, X amount of points. You have to think, how many times could it have been buffed? How many turns passed with the Dragoon on board? Could those buffs have hit the unit every single time? So it's always a tough decision to make, and sometimes it ends up costing you a card extra just to be sure they're going to win the round in some situations. So bamboozling is, like the word itself says, it's a bamboozle that it might be very deciding factor in this game, possibly.
When we see, it looks like he's going to spend that Sapper early here. Really big commitment, actually, from him, though. Generally, I could see people not wanting to spend that there. There's plenty of things you can do with that later. He likes to go ahead, and he can get a fairly large tempo play once that flips back over. I think at this point, he's actually kind of hoping that the Rabbit will proc it, just so it can flip and he doesn't have to wait 2 turns for it. If Smoonie passed here, it'd actually be a little bit of an awkward situation for him, trying to catch up in 1 card. I guess he could do it without that much of an issue. I guess a Hawker support would do it, so it's not that bad, but Smoonie has to be like a little bit taken aback here, right? He saw a pretty stock list round 1, and all of a sudden he's looking at a face down the opposing side. That can't be good.
Yeah, and it's a totally different deck, so it's definitely hard to adapt. Like, if you think your opponent's bringing something and you change your deck for that deck and then you find something completely different, it definitely messes with your mind a bit. So we'll have to see if Smoonie keeps it together and is able to plow through this round and maybe win it himself. We also see the Hawker supports don't have a unit to buff other than themselves, so that could be a problem as well.
Yeah, and we have to wonder here, if you're Smoonie here, what do you expect that face down to be? You have to respect that it's a Morin, and if it's a Morin, you actually can't play out the Aratuz Adept in your hand, even if you wanted to here, just to maybe, stop a Teruvial if you think it's Teruvial. The Frost would be great to kill off that Merc here, but you can't actually afford to play that. You have to play the Bronze Frost from hand, most likely, and that's a very, very low-tempo play. As we see Trudon just slam the Golden Dragon down, kind of just saying, I'm going to assert my dominance this round. We'll see whether or not Smoonie decides to keep playing this round, or if he's just going to give it up at this point. It's a very dangerous play with the face-down Sapper, though.
It is, but I think Trudon knows that if the Radovid does lock it, it'll go below the Thaler's value, so it's not in danger of getting scorched, if I'm not mistaken. It is a 13, I think. So I guess he can play around that. He's not too scared of scorching his own unit, which would be, obviously... Oh, look. And you can always play the Yavin with ADC, so yeah, that's what he's
That is
thinking,
true.
I said Thaler earlier, I meant the Yavin. So that's kind of his line of thought, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, just see the pass out of Smoonie here. Not bad out of Trudon. He has to be happy with that round. He got out for only -1, still has his Spy, whereas his opponent spent his already. Looking pretty for round 2 and round 3 here, depending on what he wants to do with the situation. Oh, that's a bad draw. That we know what he's mulliganing right away.
And Trudon also knows that Smoonie plays Siri, so it's always even more important to win round 1 there, because you know that if your opponent does still have Siri in his deck, it's going to be a useless 5-point gold.
What do we expect Smoonie cut for the Geralt? I'm guessing it's going to be the Vernon Roach here, right? You won't cut the Villain Trettenmirth or the Siri here?
It could be a Siri. I mean, we don't know. Maybe he didn't like how it played out in the first game. I guess we'll have to find out.
If you're expecting to be Control Mirror, you expect your opponent to have like 3 or 4 Scorch effects, right? So you can cut your Scorch effect pretty safely there, thinking that it won't really matter in this game. That would be my assumption, at least, is that he would go ahead and cut the Villain Trettenmirth, and we do see that is what his cut is, both that and the Siri, actually. As we see, he has the Baron. No, he would still the Siri. My mistake, sorry.
Yeah, that's definitely an option.
Great choice by him, in my opinion. I think that's actually a decent adaptation, since you know that the Villain Trettenmirth really won't do anything here. Your opponent's going to do all the scorching for you, usually. And we see Trudon had the basically the counterplay to it with the Sappers and the face-down cards. So we'll see what he chooses to do here. He could just play this very slow with the Yavin out. I'm inclined to think that he... I guess it depends if he thinks that whether or not Smoonie kept in his Villain Trettenmirth, and if he does think that he can go ahead and keep the Yavin a little bit longer, but it looks like he wants to commit it this round, get that card back, get out of his deck, and see what he can thin into.
We do see the Teruvial in Trudon's hand, which is going to add for a very fun Bamboozle play, because he will probably mulligan it for round 3, so he can pull it out with Isengrim, and Smoonie might not expect it to already have been in his hand in round 2 and getting buffs, So he might not expect it to be a very buffed reveal. He might expect the generic 6 being pulled from the deck by Isengrim, but it's kind of like the hidden Roach deck back in closed beta, where you expect, you know, a normal Roach or a normal card, and then you just, this very buffed card comes out of nowhere, and you sometimes don't expect it.
Absolutely, and we do see that here that he can thin his deck, and True Down side, he can thin it down a little bit more here. The one thing here that we didn't actually discuss in this game is that we did see the addition of an Olgierd in his deck here. Why do you think he added that in for this matchup? Do you think it was just to kind of let him maybe get out of a dry pass in round 2 situation?
Yeah, I think that's Olgierd's main use. It provides value over 3 rounds, more than enough silver value, and I think its biggest plus is obviously preventing that dry pass in round 2. I think that's just what Smony was going for. I think he had the tech slot, and he chose Olgierd to fill it in, I guess.
Yes, Olgierd over the Morin here. Now, one situation that we do see here, though, is whether or not he's going to spend the Nature's Gift on a Rally effect or on a Clear Skies effect. So it looks like he will go for the Rally here, pulls up the Sapper here, which actually... I don't know whether or not he actually liked that. I think he would have preferred to have seen a Merc chain out that other first light, and then from there maybe get a Dragoon. If he gets the Dragoon out, he gets 3 more points into his hand at minimum, potentially more than that if the Hawker support can kind of do blocking duty in the future for him, the one in his hand that is. So we see him kind of hit the worst hit out of his deck there, as it's not really going to do anything for this round. We'll see how deep he wants to bleed Smony here, and whether or not he just tries to get out of this in a situation where his Isengrim to reveal play can actually just punish his opponent in round 3 for not knowing what it is.
I think Trudon's not really going to catch up in points in this round, and he knows that Smony has already used his Spy, so there's no way to catch back up in card advantage. So he's just playing for round 3, and he does that by thinning his deck of bronze units and hopefully drawing into the cards he does want to draw into round 3. But like we're looking at the deck now, and there really isn't anything he does want to draw into. I mean, the brand maybe, but it's not even buffed, and there's not even going to be big units for him to hit on Smony's side because they're mostly going to be gold units with Vernon, Girl, and the Bloody Baron. So, yeah, I guess he's thinning, but not sure for what reason. Sapper's not a bad card to draw in round 3 probably.
Yeah, I figure he has to keep the Ithne and the Shiro and the Isengrim for round 3, so he really only has the Sapper and maybe the Shackles to play out this round, but you want the Shackles again if you think your opponent's eligible in Trettenmirth. So I think this is actually just his pass here, at least in my opinion. I'd want all of these cards for round 3, and I don't think you can afford to spend any of them when you need them to actually just make up that difference in the 3rd round. So we'll see whether or not he thinks this is worth his pass, or whether it's worth it to bleed out a couple more resources from Smony here.
I think he's really looking to bleed out the Ratifid as a counter to Teruvial, especially if he expects a Bork, because Teruvial is going to get buffed if he does use a support on it. So he doesn't have the enough, like you said, he should keep these cards, but I think he's keep trying to bleed out that Bork so it can't counter, or the Ratifid, I mean, so it can't counter the Teruvial in round 3. So he goes for the Ithne. It puts a lot of points on the board, but I still don't think he's going to catch up in points, to be honest, to be able to get that extra card advantage or create any big tempo necessities from Smony. So maybe that was the correct pass back there.
Yeah, no, I think that we will see the Shackles come out here, though, just to unlock one, probably the Olgierd here. The lock on the face down doesn't matter here. It's just going to do 4 points, and I believe it flips them now, correct? With the most recent update to the trap cards?
It does flip them, yes.
Yeah, so we do see that flip right away. No big deal on his side. It wasn't buffed or anything, so he's fine with that. He gets to keep his to reveal here, have that, put it back in his deck, and pull a nice little 12-pointer out of his deck, and then potentially get buffs in round 3. I do think at this point we'll see the Shackles and the Olgierd, but it looks like Smony's not going to let him do it, and he's going to get punished here for playing that Hawker support out early instead of just going for the unlock right away.
Yeah, I think the Shackles is definitely the correct play. He can keep Shackles for round 3, though, and he does know he's going to find gold units, so I think it's correct to pass here. You're really not going to commit anything else. He has a lot of gold units. He might expect a Bork, but because of the Shackles, he can Shackle, for example, Bloody Baron or that Geralt, and pretty much turn Smony's Bork against him if he is still running it.
And you have to be kind of curious here whether or not Trudon can win this now, because we know there's a Bloody Baron on top of the deck that's going to be, what, maybe a 10, 12-point body, and that plus the Geralt plus the Vernon can actually lead to a fairly large amount of gold points on Smony's side.
I think it's going to come down to the Shackles and the Scorch from the Shiru, what that can pull and what that can deal with, kind of, because I think they have very similar finishers. I guess Isengrim is actually a pretty good finisher. I mean, 7 plus 12 points with bodies that cannot be interacted with is very strong, I think. So Elven Merc is probably going to be the card that Trudon does use to transform into a Scorch, because it's not going to have too much value right now, I think.
Yeah, if he goes for the Rally effect and he hits the remaining Elven Mercenary in his deck, it's just awful. It's a 4-point bronze. If he hits the Dragoon, it's slightly better, given that he now has the brand in hand. But I don't think you can take that chance. I think you kind of just have to turn that into the Scorch and accept that you're not going to get better than that. And frankly, that's not bad. That's not a card that you really need to have here. And just you want to find Scorch value. That's the best Scorch value you're going to get. As we do see the fact that there is a 10-point Baron in hand with a 10-point Geralt. Not that big compared to what it can be.
Not a big Baron at all. I think for a deck that pretty much revolves around buffing that exact unit, it's a bit on the small side maybe. So that's the interesting thing with these control matchups where you don't really have that much chance to control because you're playing control yourself. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see that Bloody Baron is not very big at all. And he is going to probably shackles either the Bloody Baron or the Geralt.
I mean, you expect it's just the Baron here, right? Like, there's no reason to expect that there's a Geralt in your opponent's hand here. He gets to take his time here, though. He has plenty of options with his hand here. He can play it slow with the Shirud, then he has the Shackles, or the Brand Effect, or the Scorch if he really needed it for some reason. Although I don't expect Smoonie to ever have a unit that would be worthy of that over the Baron here. And, like, what do you do if you're Smoonie here? You just have to start playing your stuff out slowly? I'm not sure whether this is enough. Oh, no. This is going to buff that to an 8 and then a 10. This could be backbreaking.
Yeah, I think Trudon had the idea to maybe convert that Scorch into a Shackles, because Elven Merc does get the buff from the Teruvial. Even if it pulls another dead Elven Merc, they do get the buff, so it's not that bad of a play. And the Shackles is kind of dead, because if it's a big gold unit like a Tibor, for example, it's worth it. But
now you want it.
Yeah,
now it's going to give you a pair of 10s. This is going to be just absolutely disgusting.
I think he had the idea to maybe, before that was played, to convert the Shackles into a Scorch, but it looks like he's going to keep the Shackles this time around.
This depends on what you expect your opponent to have in his hand, right? If you expect him to have a non-gold unit left, then you keep the Brand, and if you expect him to not, then you keep the Mercs here. If he doesn't have it, then the Mercs are obviously the better play here, as we see him basically take that line. So he decided that he thought that his opponent won't have a bronze or silver unit in hand that he can deal with the Brand, so he's just going to take the 2 units for the Teruvial here.
The thing is, even if, Smoonie does have a chance to murder Brocky, that Redanian Knight, unless the Shackle is played immediately, and that would buff it over 10. So, and we do see Shackles is not played immediately. So that might give Smoonie a chance to do that.
I wonder, Does he play the Roach or the Murder Brock here? If he plays, the Roach can't target your own side, can it? It's only enemies?
Yeah, it's only enemies, I believe.
So do you think he'll go Murder Brock, putting 5 into the Dragoon here? Thinking that they can get Vernon Roach to proc 2? I think that'll be his line here, actually.
Yeah, he might not expect the Shackles to hit both 10, so... Obviously, it's a play that I was calling out, but if you don't see both players' hands, you don't really expect that play to happen, because it might not be... It's too much of a risk, really, from...
He's going to lose because of this line, isn't he? This line is particularly going to make him lose this game. That's wild. And imagine Trudon here at a 50-50 for that Dragoon that otherwise could have been another Elven Mercenary that would have instantly been Vernon Roached here, which would have been an instant loss for him. So this is actually going to be crazy with the Shackles, and Smoonie can feel good seeing this.
Yeah, and like we said, Vernon Roach does not target both sides. It only targets the enemy side. So unlike Murder Brock, you can only target the enemy side, so it can't proc that. Even if it could proc, it's too late.
I wonder why he actually killed that off. He killed off the Mercenary there when he didn't have to.
Yeah, I think that was just a misplay, to be honest, because he would have gotten more value, just like you said, hitting the Dragoon.
Not even that. He could have hit the Dragoon for 2, then shot his own Knight for 2. Oh, no, he couldn't have done that, excuse me. He wouldn't have had enough. No, he could have done that. He could have shot the Dragoon for 2, shot his Knight for 2, and then shot the Dragoon for 1, had a 3 and a 2 on his opponent's board, and then also buffed his Knight. So that's just a completely misplayed Murder Brock overall.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was definitely the card that lost in the game. It's obviously a tough sequence to do, because you have to decide, where you're putting your ports in, what's going to give you the max value. But I think your line of play was definitely the correct one. It was a close game. Control matchups always come down to who can really have the best situation round 3, and it looked to be on both players' sides, but it ended up costing Smoonie the game, really, the misplay with the Murder Brocky. It was definitely hard to see that line, though. It's not an easy, it's not, the Igni's going to be played, I'll play around Igni. It's not as simple as that. Obviously, if we're casting and looking at both players' hands, it's much easier, because we have, a few rounds to see that coming. But as a player, it must be very tough to see that, I think.
Yeah, and we'll see whether that affects him here in the final round, as he is going to be the final player for his team. We'll see whether or not the Radovid deck can actually eke out a win here, as we do have Petrify back on the Henselt against me and the Radovid. Neither of these decks have had a good showing today. I think that they've accounted for, what, all 4 of the losses so far?
Yeah, I think so.
Am I thinking about that right? Yeah, because we saw the Henselt. Well, we only saw the Henselt once.
Once in this matchup.
Okay, so yeah, so we've accounted for 3 of the 4 losses so far between these two decks. So we're gonna finally get one win here. And taking a look at this opening hand, this is this could get dicey here. He recovers it though. It looks like didn't hit a bad draw there, which he could have had multiple of. And I think this is actually looks like a pretty good hand for Petrify overall. Yeah,
the hands are really important in the Henselt matchups. I think it's primordial to have, you know, the good cards, because if you draw into many infantrymen, you draw into, you know, the wrong amount of bronze units, then it can really mess up your round 1. And obviously the round 1 with Henselt is a lot of setup with the sergeants, and if you can't get the correct setup, and it'll just be really tough to control round 2 and get the, you know, the perfect situation for the round 3 Reaver Hunters.
Yeah. Now, if you're Petrify, how do you want to, like, what is your optimal opening line here against this matchup? Since we know the Radovid deck always has a decent amount of removal, both soft and hard, whether it's weather, whether it's things like thunder, as Petrify goes a little bit wild. What's your optimal opening line here? What are you looking for to answer your opponent that might let you win this round without committing those late game resources that you have?
I mean, he has a Shawnee, so he's not too scared to play the Sergeant. He knows it's going to get Thundered probably, but he does have the Shawnee, and that does run with armor, so it's enough to protect from the second Thunder. And it also can't get Scorched because there is a Redanian Knight on board. So it's a tough matchup, though. It's not a matchup you see too much on ladder, so I imagine both players don't have too much experience with Henselt versus Radovid. The Northern Realms matchup is not something you see very often, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd imagine Smootie's the one with more experience here, as he is someone who has played Radovid a fair amount, whereas Petrify, even with his Henselt experience, probably has not that experience in this particular matchup. Smootie probably considering which of his options are best to play here, whether it is the Radovid or the Thunder. You have to imagine it's the Thunder here, though. Probably out the Soleil, actually. Just play her, get the tempo with the body on the board, get the Thunder out, get rid of that Sergeant before he can Henselt it.
Yeah, I think the Soleil is definitely the correct option here. You need the tempo against the Henselt deck. It's also, if you think you're going to get rid of that Sergeant, you know you're going to get rid of a lot of tempo unless he has Shawnee. So he goes for the Radovid here.
That's an interesting play. I'm actually not sure why he went for that here. There's so many things that Radovid can do later in this matchup, particularly with Reaver Hunters, that you don't need to spend it that early unless he's looking to get buff points onto his Bloody Baron early and just buff that out of range to where it can win round 3. But I'm actually not sure I'm a fan of that. I think I would have just liked to see the Thunder there.
Yeah, Reaver Hunters.
Yeah, like Shawnee here, like he already knows that Petrify favored the Shawnee list earlier, the Shawnee Naneki list. So if Petrify rolls that back, which he did, Shawnee here on the Sergeant makes it out of the Thunder range.
Yeah, wasting the Radovid so early against a deck that runs Reaver Hunters, where 2 locks are so valuable in round 3. Especially if Smoonie can win round 1 and control, you know, and not have to waste that Radovid round 2 and save it for round 3 against those Reaver Hunters. It's definitely questionable. I don't know what his exact train of thought is to commit that much so early when the Thunder would have done basically the same thing. Obviously, a lot less tempo, but.
Yeah, I have to agree there. I really expected to see a different line there from him, but now that he's committed to it, we'll see what he does here. So he likes to go for the rally effect off Soleil instead of having the Thunder access like he had last time, and he will pull another Redanian Knight out of his deck. But for now, he's actually locked in with the Scorch in his hand as well, and no favors from his deck here as he sees a Biting Frost off the top from that draw effect.
Yeah, same thing happened the last game, so he's definitely getting shafted by that one. And Shawnee's a great counter to these control cards round 1 that do have the target removal, like Thunders that aren't running so many decks now in ladder anyway, but they're definitely good against Lugos, for example, in the King Brand matchup, which is much more common on ladder anyway. So Shawnee's a great card to use round 1 just to make sure you can get this combo off and pretty much buff your whole deck. It's pretty much the most important combo, I think, in the Henselt deck.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And Smoonie over here wishing that Biting Frost was an epidemic desperately. Kind of stuck in a hard place here, to be honest. He can play the Aretusa Adept, but he's going to have to commit multiple turns to that. And if you're going to go with that line, you kind of want to get that off early so you can get the maximum value out of it. This deep into a round, it is 3 cards deep already into the round, so he's going to have already lost 6 points of damage off of those Frost procs. It's honestly not the best situation for him here. I have to suspect here that Petrify is feeling pretty happy about where the situation is here compared to what it could have been.
Yeah, and because Smooney did lose the coin flip, which is obviously a huge deal against Henselt, because especially I think Henselt and Consume Monsters are two very similar decks in the way they play out in some scenarios, because they both have very strong round 1 tempo plays with Arrakis Behemoth and Regis, for example, and also the Henselts and the Sergeant combo. So I think both decks, if they win the coin, if they go second in the matchup, it's super, super important. And they also have the big round 3 card advantage finisher with Reaver Hunters or Grave Hack. So I think they're very similar in that regard. And winning the coin flip, it's super important in the Henselt matchup. So I think Petrify definitely has an edge right now.
Do you consider the passy if you're Petrify? Since you're up a card, you can guarantee you up 2 cards at that point. Is that worth it, or is it worth it just to play out a card here?
Knowing you're going up against a Bork deck, it's maybe a bit risky. Giving a control deck, like I said earlier and many times before, even if you're going 2 cards up, giving the control deck the chance to, well, control you is a bit of a risk sometimes. But the 2-card advantage is very big for Petrify, because he can play around that Bork in round 3 with at least one of his Reaver Hunters. So I guess we'll see if it comes back to bite him.
Chooses to take it here, and he does have the Thaler in hand, which means that he always will have that extra play. He is a
Yeah, and we saw in the King Brand matchup as well, where the card advantage against the Bork was ultimately the move that ended up giving the victory to the King Brand deck to Aglosa, because he did have that last say against the Bork. We do see a Thunder coming down here on the Commando just to win this round. So Smooney does take the round finally, but he is 2 cards down, which is going to be a bit of a problem going into this next round 2. He's going to have to find a way to get that card advantage back. If he does have the Siri, he can use that Siri to get at least 1 card back, and he can also draw a Spy to get the 2 card advantage back. But he's going to have to rely on Petrify not drawing his Spy as well, which might be tough, because he already has it in hand. So it's definitely going to be a tough situation for Smooney to get that card advantage back.
And we see good draws out of both players. Petrify picking up both a Redanian Nightelect and a Reaver Hunter, whereas Smooney picks up the obvious Bloody Baron, and then also picks up his own Thala, which is actually a great pickup for him. It means that his reinforcement can be used for a variety of options now instead of that, and it looks like he's probably going to elect, since he kept the Bloody Baron, he's just going to play his reinforcement here, pull his Sarah out, and get his 4th gold out of his deck. So here we will find out if that is a Siri, or if he switched out that gold for a different one this game as well.
And the fact that Petrify was able to pass and get that 2-card advantage while still keeping very, very big plays like the triple Knight Elect and the Infantrymen is very huge for round 2. I mean, Infantrymen in this deck is I'd almost consider it like carryover. It might seem odd to think of it that way, but it's such a big tempo play that it almost acts like carryover, even if it requires you to actually play a card. It works in the same way for dry passes, I think, against certain decks. It's the same with Queen's Guards, for example. There's such big plays in round 2 that it's almost like the opponent has carryover already going into the round.
Absolutely, and this might come down. We do see Petrify go ahead and he takes the tempo play here. We will see the Siri come down for Smooney eventually in this round and gain back some of that card advantage. And what we might see this game come down to, actually looking at it, is whether or not Petrify and Team XD Esports can find that Dandelion in the deck and offset the Reaver Hunters away from those Scorch effects that Smooney has. He does have 2 of them in his hand, but if you can offset maybe the first one thanks to Thaler and let that one soak up 1 hit, and then you can get Dandelion to then offset the 2nd hit, then that's a win condition here for you. And thanks to the Thaler in hand, if they can keep close enough here in points with Smooney, and just in general for this round, they can go ahead, they can stay at least 1 card up into round 3, and then they always get last play as well. So we'll see whether or not they can actually accomplish that here.
Obviously, because Smooney won round 1, Petrify's Infantryman play isn't considered as carryover to force a dry pass, but it gives him much more options to be able to play optimally in round 2 without falling behind in tempo, which I think is super important. So it pretty much acts the same way. It gives him the chance to set up plays where he might not be able to set them up otherwise if Smooney does force him into making big tempo plays to keep up and maintain that 2-card advantage. So, like we see, he can play with Thaler here, and he's still very much ahead. So, he definitely keeps those 2-card advantage, and that's going to be huge going into round 3, I think.
And another huge thing here is that Petrify draws into the Dimeridium Shackles here, which is actually a tech choice that I think they probably made just for this matchup. Generally, it's not a card that you'll see in this deck. You'll see Immune Boost here instead. So they're teching specifically expecting Smooney to have that Villain Trettenworth back in this round and having it as an answer for it in the very end of the game. And that can actually be a back-breaking card here, whether it is for either the Villain Trettenworth or even if they're feeling kind of spicy and think that they have the game on lock, they can always Shackles the Siri and then not let Smoonie get that extra card back. So we'll see what happens with that Shackles, but definitely one of the best draws Petrify could have while he is ahead and doesn't need the tempo play that that card could have provided if it was, say, another Redanian Night Elect.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think Shackles, in most cases, is a bad card, but in some matchups, it's a very good card. Especially in tournaments where you can almost predict the opponent's deck, especially in this format where you know Smoonie has to play Radovid. You can maybe expect, key cards that go into Radovid deck, like Bloody Baron or Tibor, or, Bork, and Siri, for example, as well. So it's clear that Shackles is a good card in this matchup. I dislike it maybe in ladder, but in tournament play, I think you could definitely find a spot in a lot of the decks, especially control decks, or even like Petrify's playing in a deck that doesn't control at all. It's a combo deck that runs Temerium Shackles to block the opponent from controlling. So I think it's definitely a good tech choice, though.
I just want to see his opponent play a Villain Trattenmirth and then him shackle it, and then his opponent play a gold card, and then he plays Submarine Circle and gets a Villain Trattenmirth. That's all I really want to see here. Whether or not we'll see that, or whether we'll see Submarine Circle shenanigans happen this game, I'm not sure yet, but we are seeing them just trade off resources here. I'm waiting to see Smoonie slam that Siri. It's going to probably signify him getting out of this round here soon. He has to decide whether he wants to also play the Redanian Knight here. I don't expect him to do anything stupid with the Scorch here. I think he wants to hold the Scorch and the Villain Trattenmirth here for the third round and just try to take the game over with a flurry of those Scorch effects. We'll see whether or not that happens here, and we'll see what Petrify decides to answer with here, as he will go for the Reaver Scout, pulling out yet another Redanian Knight Elect from his deck.
So the Shackles here, this reminds me of closed beta. A lot of people maybe would think the Shackles of Siri to deny that card advantage, but because it's a zero tempo play and you're not ahead to start with, it's literally doing nothing. It's doing, like, Siri still gets the card advantage. So it happened a lot in the Squid mirrors back in closed beta, so it reminded me of that, but that's where Shackles is not a good idea. You definitely don't want to use it at that point, unless you have the chance to Shackles and still be ahead in points.
Yeah, and with this kind of a situation, he knows his opponent's going to be playing Villain Trattenmirth, and honestly, looking at his hand and looking at his deck, if he gets that any line with the Cure Mets at the top here, he realistically only really loses to the Villain Trattenmirth, so he shouldn't really concern himself with that Siri. He should concern himself instead with going into this and actually winning round 3 here, and he has all the resources he needs for it right now, honestly.
So he's not going to commit to the board to this round, but he does still have a Scorch which is worth 12 points, which is a very big tempo swing, which might force Petrify to have to commit things he might not have wanted to commit otherwise. We might have to see a Reaver Hunter going down.
Yeah, I think that you're actually okay committing one here, because then you can commit the second one after the Operator, and then they're offset. So that's kind of hedging your bets again there. We'll see whether or not he decides to actually Operator first. That is a line he could take here and then play the other one, so it gets buffed by 1 point. It might come down to personal preference here, but he has to assume that he's going to get the pass from Smoonie right here. Smoonie could go down one more card, but I think the pass here will be the most likely play, and he suspects that as well. So it's figuring out which card you want to play out here. And what's it going to be? The Dijkstra. Ooh.
I think it's a bit risky, but I think it might be the correct play. You don't have to commit.
Vest sucks. You don't have to. Still, like, you're just thinning a Vest. It's not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah, it still puts points on the board. It's still, a solid amount of points that will have to force out that Scorch anyway, so.
Yeah, so I think we'll see the Vest pick here, and then he'll just try to dig for the Reaver Hunter next turn. Oh, actually, never mind. He's going for the Reaver Hunter, making a liar out of me. Now, the interesting thing here is that it means that because he played it this way and he didn't hit the Dandelion, it means that he has no way to offset his Reaver Hunters now. So these Scorch effects could actually blow him out if he's not careful. He does have the D-Shackle with a Villain Trattenmirth, but the Scorch in hand could do a lot of work this third round.
Although he does have a lot of card advantage, so maybe he's not going to get the trio effect up, but he will have, a few surviving Reaver Hunters for sure, even after the Scorch effect.
Smoonie's not considering a Scorcher, is he?
He might.
That would be so risky.
He might be. He knows he's gonna get something out of Petrify, a Reaver Hunter, pretty much for sure, if he does commit the Scorcher. But, of course, it's only a 12-point Scorch. He's going to put Petrify down to 40 points, and just a single Reaver Hunter does it.
Here's the thing, though, is that, like, what is Petrify drawing into here? What does Petrify want to see here? Definitely not Vest. Do you prefer Cure or Dandelion here? Probably just the Cure, right, for the Thunderbolt offset?
Yep, I'd imagine so. It denies some Scorch value there as well. Although, of course, Petrify doesn't know if Smoonie is playing just a standard Scorch card. I don't know if he was in the recent matchups before this.
Oh, when he gets the Kira? That has to be what he wants here.
Hand. Yeah, I think that's a perfect hand. You can't really complain there.
And then Smooney, we'll see what he elects to do, if he elects to keep the series here or he pitched back looking for a different card. Last time I actually kind of bit him that he pitched it back and got the last rate instead. He does elect to keep it here. And only, once again, we're seeing a Bloody Bear that actually isn't really going to do much in this situation, which he has to feel bad about, an 11-point Baron here. It's not a nice thing to sit on. So you see him just kind of look through his hand. He also has to be careful. He has to suspect his opponent could have Summoning Circle here. So he needs to be careful. He knows his opponent has 2 units in his hand, so there's 2 cards here that were not copyable by the operator. And
if I'm not mistaken, I think Petrify ended up using the Summoning Circle from the Dijkstra last turn.
Oh, yes, you're right.
With the Redanian Knight.
Yep.
He does miss out on that, and Smooney does know that card's not there, so there is no threat with playing that Reaver Hunter pretty much at any point in time. There's really no... I mean, obviously it's a body that's not gold, so it gives some interaction to Petrify if he does have any kind of spell cards that do damage opposing units, so maybe it's best to play that last anyway. But...
yeah, I suspect that we'll see the 4 Reaver Hunter play out here. Playing the 7 out does get it buffed above the operator, but I feel like it depends if he, I guess it depends if he thinks he can bait out the Scorch Effect here, right? If he thinks he can bait a Scorch Effect out, play this one out now, let it eat the smaller one at this point, and then go on later with the bigger one, so it will offset them.
Honestly, I don't know
looks
if...
like it's in a good spot, though.
I'm not sure I remember correctly if Scorch was used in the previous deck list that Smooney was playing. Maybe he just doesn't expect the Scorch. I don't know. I don't remember if it was
I think you know this matchup is going to be teched heavily for both sides. They both
yeah,
know
that's
the losers
true.
are. So I don't think there's any way, shape, or form that Petrify can come into this matchup and not expect his opponent to put a Scorch in the deck.
Yeah, that's also true. I mean, Scorch is obviously a very, very strong card against Reaver Hunter, especially if you don't stagger them, which we do see 2 8s here, so that could definitely be a problem.
Now, I'd like to see the Kira actually put on the side and buff both of these. I think that he's giving up points if he doesn't here. The Reaver Hunter on the left here, if he plays another one, that Reaver Hunter is always going to be ahead of them anyway. It looks like he's just going to go for the triple Thunderbolt Potion here, get maximum greed out of it, which actually is not a bad play either. How does Smooney realistically deal with this board? He doesn't. There's nothing that can wipe all 3 of these here, except maybe like a D-Bomb, but even that's not going to do anything here.
I think it's correct to play all 3 units. I mean...
yeah, absolutely.
Because you have the Shackles for the Bork anyway, so there's like one of the Reaver Hunters going to get Scorched no matter what. Doesn't matter what value it's at. Like even if it gets Scorched, you know, right as it goes down or even later, it's going to get Scorched no matter what. The value doesn't matter too much, I think, because something's getting Scorched anyway.
Yeah, and we're going to see that D-Shackles that they picked up very early in this game, the Petrify held on to the entire time. It's going to come in and be a critical card here. He's just holding on to it here just to make sure that there's not some wonky thing with that last unknown card in hand. He doesn't have to play it. He can wait till the turn after next, actually, if he really wants to. He knows that one of Smooney's card is the copy Reaver Hunter, so there's only really one card he has to worry about, and Smooney's hovering it now.
Yeah, I mean, with a double Scorch effect, then it would be much, much closer. But I think with the Shackles, it's going to be the decider here. I mean, there's one Scorch that denies the trio effect, which really wasn't going to be that big anyway because it's only going to hit the Shackled Bork. So not too big. But yeah, I think this is game for Petrify. I think
and he has to be happy by that the tech choice to put the D-Shackles in here is going to single-handedly win this game. If he hadn't done that, he'd be in actually a pretty big set of trouble here, as he has a pair of 11-2 that would then get scorched by the Bork. So very heads up play to tech that in. They understood what the matchup would be. They understood that this matchup would come down to their opponents doing Bork as a scorch in a way to secure the final round, and they found their counter to it. As Petrify and Team XD Esports takes a very close overall set, 3-2 down from Card Game Nerds. Now, what are your thoughts about the overall matchup here?
That was a great series. I think we learned that maybe Radovid isn't in the best form for tournament play. It can be played around very easily. It can be played around very easily. Yeah, maybe not. I mean, it's good in some matchups if you can force those matchups, but if you don't have the chance to force that those matchups, like we saw here with Smooney being the last player and having to play against certain decks, it obviously makes it a lot tougher for Radovid to have, because it just doesn't have that strong of a round one. Like you said earlier, it relies a lot on weather. It has a big crutch, so unless it gets a ton of value from weather, it might, like against certain decks that have a very strong round one, it can't fight those round ones, and if it doesn't win the round one, it doesn't have control of round two and can't set up the round three properly with a big Bloody Barons. And again, Bloody Baron, I mean, 10 points in one game, 11 points in the next, probably not ideal.
You know what? I'm just gonna put out a blanket statement here and saying that since the Northern Realms decks went 1-4 and that one win came in the mirror match, let's just not bring Northern Realms anymore. How about that?
I think that might be a good idea.
Let's focus on Eithne and Nilfgaard and Bran and Dagon that'll be banned. That's my point from now on. So let's throw it back now to the host and see what they thought of the match.
Well, thank you very much for the cast. I thought it was pretty awesome. Words are hard today. HG3, what do you think?
Well, you finally got your wish. We went to 5 games, so
we needed a 5
pretty
games.
happy about that.
I'm always happy with 5 games.
I think that match was really cool, and I do like sets going to 5 games because then you have that one instance where it's like everything's on the table. Like, hey, I know your leader, you know my leader. Let's fix the decks. Let's tech in some stuff. You saw Petrified teched in the Dime Shackles. Let's go at it and see who could come up with the victory. My one major concern with the whole series is that Smune decided to run Radovid, and while Radovid has a pocket where he can be effective, I think in terms of versatility as a leader, he has the least of it out of the Northern Realms leaders. Foltest being the most versatile, you could put whatever cards you want in there and he could still play it. Hensel being okay, and Radovid being very narrow focused and difficult to tech efficiently and effectively. So that was my real concern with the card game nerds, but they put up a good fight.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you look at the ranked ladder, you've seen Radovid has kind of fallen out of favor a lot since earlier in the meta, and there's a clear reason why, as we saw today. He just couldn't perform when he needed to. I mean, the questionable Radovid lock early in that game 5 is definitely something that maybe played into that loss because there are just so many better targets to lock. But saying that, I mean, by game 5, you're going to be feeling pretty fatigued, and it's the kind of situation where I think players are more likely to misplay. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, it's a long series, and like I said, when you know that you're coming at Radovid again and again and again, I think you just have an advantage from a lot of perspectives of different decks. But that's not to say that card game nerds didn't play well, because they had a game when they were playing their Reddit Skellige where the opening hand was just bad. Morkvarg was in hand, Olgierd was in hand, and they pulled off that victory against True Dawn, I believe it was, and that means that they picked their matchup well and they competed well, because stuff like that, when you have your carryover cards and they're not what I consider easy carryover, like they don't play themselves, then you get into a little bit of a risky situation where all of a sudden Scoia'tael can compete. So, they had opportunities that they could have fumbled a bit. They played pretty well. There were some questionable moments throughout the series, but this is definitely what's going to look like 2 top teams going at it. I think this is a good forecast of what's to come in the rest of the tournament.
Oh, 100%. And I don't think you can fault them for trying something different. No one would really expect a Radovid. When they're choosing the decks that they're going to be running, no one's going to be thinking. If you're thinking control, you're thinking Scoia'tael. We saw plenty of Scoia'tael control throughout this series. So it's maybe something where you're trying to throw your opponent because it's a bit of a more challenging matchup, and thus it's maybe a bit trickier in terms of how you play into it. Similarly with Mill, a lot of decks, they play very kind of cookie cutter. You kind of know more or less what your strategy is, but when you go up against Mill, that kind of throws it. For example, in discard, you're suddenly not discarding. These are the kind of situations that make for interesting games, and give card games nerds their due. I think they put up a hell of a fight.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And now we have the image for the week 3 brackets. We have all the scores filled in. The question marks are now resolved. We know that Team XD Esports are now maintaining their undefeated record. They're going to be 3-0. That means they have a very clear road to qualifying for playoffs. I think 2 more victories. I think 5 wins guarantees it. Not 100% sure, but I'm 99, I think. So that's going to be their journey against a couple other teams that are undefeated that we'll get to see later. But looking at the schedule or these results, do you see anything that stands out to you, Jairus?
Having a quick look, I think that, it's a shame to see F2K Group 2, which is Mogwai's group, fall. That was something that I know a lot of people were kind of excited for, especially as after we saw the Gwent together, I don't know even how you're supposed to say it, Gwent together tournament, and he took that home. I think people were expecting bigger things. Club Penguin getting their 3-0 finally. I know a lot of people have been looking for a Club Penguin win, and we have one there for this week, so that's pretty nice to see. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think Club Penguin are overdue for a win. They're on 2 losses too, I believe. So they're really close to just bowing out of this tournament. There's a lot of good teams that are so close to bowing out. I mentioned them before, but it's worth revisiting. Like Gwentlemen Blue would have been favorites to go far. Strawberry Dumplings and Club Penguin. These are all 1 and 2 teams that have the potential to match up now for the rest of the Swiss format, because they're going to be on the same win track. Of course, there's one very disappointing result on this page for me. Idealist NA. Suffering the reverse sweep. I didn't think anyone could lose 3 games in a row with Skellige, but my buddy Manti did it. So we're at least, we're forging a new path in our losses as well. So
That's
there's
true,
that.
Finland have been playing pretty well. If we're going for the countries, Finland and I think Brazil are both 3-0 at the end of this week. So
yeah, and you're foreshadowing something because I know that they're playing next week. So that's going to be a pretty PogChamp match. I'm going to root for my boy Pride to get revenge to save Manty's legacy. We're going to take a look at some of the undefeated teams remaining, as we were kind of on that topic anyways. You see Finland, undefeated. You mentioned Brazil, featuring Pride, Lampium, and I can't remember the third player. It might be Gwentar. And, F2K, they've lost one team. But like you said, having 3 teams in the competition can only be helpful. They got Group 3 fighting strong, undefeated right now.
Yeah, Fade to Karma, that just seems to be their strategy. It's just like, we'll just have loads of teams and hopefully we'll win. But no, give F2K Group 3 their due. That's Metronor, Aya, and Varanis. And,
I think we watched them get defeated today, actually. So I think
so this must be incorrect. I just realized.
I think that's Group 1 with Crokies and JJ, Pasha.
Group 1 is Crokies, JJ, Pasha, and Cypher, which I think are 3-0, whereas Group 3 didn't win today. They unfortunately lost. So if you're watching, I'm sorry, we kind of rubbed it in your face a little bit.
They were trying to revise it a little bit. They snuck in, like, we'll take the credit. They'll forget. And here's that week 4 schedule. So, looking ahead, we said Brazil versus Finland is somewhere down here. They're in the second row. That's going to be a big one. There's a lot of nice matchups that hopefully we'll get to see next week. Hopefully the recordings will be fantastic and stuff. Aardvark versus XD Esports could be a great series. I don't know much about Aardvark, but they've been doing very well so far.
No, Aardvark is Creepy, Madara ZA, and the Joker, where the E's are 3s. And this is the thing I really like about these sort of tournaments, like this kind of invitational structure, is it allows players that maybe haven't shined in the past to suddenly climb up to renown. And, you always love a bit of an underdog, and people are generally cheering for the teams that they know. You saw a lot of people cheering for McBeard in the chat. We saw people, shouting for Merchant and stuff. Whereas these unknown players, they maybe don't have as much chat love, but hopefully this is their opportunity to kind of make their mark on the Gwent scene.
Yeah, and of course with that comes the fact that there are prizes set aside for MVP, favorite play of the tournament, and favorite meme of the tournament. So if you guys see a play or a player or a meme, if there was a meme today that you really like, make sure you tweet at Gwentlemen. Maybe take a clip of it through Twitch clips, or if it's in your games you're actually playing, then make sure you're recording so you could submit this stuff. Because I know the Gwentlemen want to have a collection of clips so they can try and have categories that people could vote on, so you can get your favorite MVP his due. Because a lot of players aren't going to be featured. We're only casting 2 games per week, but there's still a lot of great plays happening out there. And the better you play, the further you're going to go. So hopefully you'll get that spotlight eventually, but it's just not possible to cast all these games right now. So make sure you're getting the clips in if you have them.
Oh, definitely. We have 50 teams playing up to, 5 games apiece each week. So it is something that potentially we're not going to see. But like I say, lots of players are recording their games as well. And if you check out YouTube, I know some players post their own kind of viewpoint of the games on YouTube. So if there's someone that you particularly like, maybe you could ask them to do that. The one thing I really want to talk about in the future is that things are going to be quite exciting. Maybe not week 4 so much as week 5, because we do have Gamescom this weekend. So hopefully a lot of changes are going to be seen. I know people in chat have been talking about gold cards being targetable, for example. And the week that drops on the TGI, I think is going to be one of the best ones to watch.
Yeah, that's something I've talked about with my team and a couple other players in particular. The idea of being an adaptive or innovative style of player is going to come into play at some point when the patch hits. And that's something we knew when TGI started. We weren't going to play this all out in one patch. And if we were going to do it miserably, but we were hoping that that wasn't going to happen. There had to be a patch eventually. So that's going to change things around a little bit. This is a dead meta, so everybody knows it. There's some slight innovation that's weasels its way in the form of mill, and some of these square tall decks are getting a little bit of a twist to them. But once it comes down to taking a lot of changes and processing them quickly, that's an entirely different skill, and that's where some players are going to thrive and others are going to collapse a bit. So the dynamic is going to shift a bit, and that should be really interesting and exciting to look forward to. I'm with you on that.
Oh, for sure. It's going to give some of these maybe teams that have got their 2 losses a chance to potentially catch up, and maybe some of these undefeated titans we might see start to falter. But I guess that remains to be seen in the future. And for now, we have nothing much left to do but say thank you to all sorts of people.
Yeah, we want to say thank you to everybody that donated today. We're getting so close to that $1,000 goal. And if you guys can help us to it, that would be fantastic. Of course, 100% of donations go to the prize pool. So donate to Gwentlemen, put in your little message, say hi, try and make Vishra and Panda read it, even though I think they failed to read one of them for some reason.
I know, I'm so disappointed in them.
You guys got to ride them a little bit harder next time. Get them to do it. So make sure you're donating. And, this can be a great opportunity for some players that we've seen today to win their first decent prize pool, perhaps, in esports and help them segue to be more and more competitive moving forward. So I think if you guys have an opportunity to donate, you should go for it. It's going to be awesome. And I think that's pretty much it for me for this week. You want to say your shout outs, Jairus?
Oh, well, obviously we have to say thanks to our casters for this week. I think everyone did a fantastic job. So Vishra, Swim, Pumpkin, and Panda. Shout outs to the admins, the people who are working behind the scenes, making everything kind of work. Shout out to McBeard's Alzheimer's. Oh man, hopefully in the future we'll have better video quality. And obviously shout outs to chat who keep the memes alive and have also been donating so much with all of these weird messages for us to read. I've had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I think that's a wrap for this week, guys. This is your third week of TGI. We're halfway done. And someone will see you next week. Make sure to tune in same time, 2 p.m. Eastern. I don't know what time it is over in Europe, but good luck figuring it out. See you next Tuesday.
Bye.
I am the Senate.
Not yet.
It's treason, then.